The broadcast is live, except this time on my end it says you are live.
Mm-hmm.
It's better than saying you are dead.
Ah, who wants to hear that? Not me.
Hello.
You were dead. Congratulations.
Defending your life.
So what's been going on since the last time we talked to each other?
What has gone on? Watching football all last weekend. It's funny how many football games I'm watching because I usually watch the Giants game every week.
Right.
But this year in the NFL, they added an extra an extra one team per conference. So it used to be on the opening weekend of like the football playoffs, there were 4 games.
Right.
And there were 4 games the next week too. Now on the opening weekend of football, there are 6 games. So it's like 2 weekends ago, I just had football on. I mean, there were 6 games. Not that I was watching them all and giving them my complete attention or anything like that.
Right.
But still, there were 6 games on that I had on from all day. And I was just by Sunday night, I was like, holy cow, that was 6 games of football.
Yeah,
I don't think I've ever done that before.
I don't watch it like I used to. I'm a Miami Dolphins fan, and after Dan Marino retired, it just never was the same after that.
Right.
If there's 2 teams now playing that I have no interest in whatsoever, it doesn't do anything for me. Now, if it's 2 teams I'm interested in, that's a different story. The same thing with baseball too. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, baseball. I was never. I'm really just a football fan. The only time I was into baseball is when the times in my life when I was around a friend who was really into baseball.
Right.
I kind of get into it through them. You get into it through their excitement.
Sure, exactly, and I can think that applies to a few other subjects too. It's kind of cool to see somebody else get excited, and you're excited for them because you're
like. So, growing up, my friend and neighbor next door was a big New York Mets fan.
Uh-huh.
So, my memories of high school summers are playing stickball with the Mets on the radio because he was always listening to a Mets game.
Did you ever go to Shea Stadium?
Yeah, years ago. Went to a few in my youth. I did.
I've never been to a pro game. I went to when I was a kid when I was playing Little League baseball. We went to a Bush League game, and it was an Orioles. That's the word I'm looking for. An Orioles farm team.
Ah.
Of course, we didn't know at the time who this guy was eventually going to be, but I got to see Cal Ripken Jr. play minor league ball.
Ah.
And of course, nobody thought to get his autograph or anything because he was just another player. Nobody, knew who was.
That just reminded me, I was actually on the Shea Stadium field once because, like I said, my friend who was a big Mets fan, must have been either in college or right after college. They had Banner Day, where it was in between a doubleheader. When you bring banners out onto the field and have a contest or something. So he wanted to do that. So he made a banner and brought it out onto the field. But it was so freaking hot. It was August. We didn't even stay for the second game because we were so hot.
Yeah, some of those days you can be, depending on where the sun is hitting you, you can be pretty miserable out there.
Yeah.
That's one of the things I always liked about watching soccer on TV, especially like European soccer crowds.
Mm-hmm.
They bring giant banners and humongous flags and all kinds of,
and dangerous weapons too.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's true too.
Looks like we've got some people here now.
Yeah.
Where's D'Artagnan? Tim had a death in the family.
Yeah.
So he's busy with that right now. His father-in-law, who passed on this week after an illness, I think he had. I'm not 100% sure there, but he's off with the family grieving. So
which one of us is Lactose and Porthos now?
Howdy, guys. Rangersley is here too.
Hello, people.
Dr. Silverage is here. Good evening.
Hello.
Good evening.
So we got a nice crowd to warm up.
Yeah.
They may even expect us to say something intelligent. Boy, are they
a nice comic book crowd.
In for a surprise.
Well, since Matt the Comics is here, I can bring up a subject that at least he has heard of. French comic book creator Jean Graton died yesterday. He was 97 years old.
Wow. Who is he?
Yeah, he was the last one that was still alive who worked for Tintin magazine. For Tintin.
Wow. You know, there's a new Stan Lee book coming out in February?
Yep.
I didn't realize that. I found it interesting because it says it focuses a lot on his post-Marvel life. Right. And all the crazy schemes and con men who surrounded him in like the 90s and 2000s.
I get the feeling it's going to be fairly controversial for people who haven't followed Stanley's career other than just tangentially.
Right. Because I read a little...
a lot of people are going to have very shocked reactions.
Right.
Read it.
Because I can't remember. Period should be pretty easy to document because Stan Lee has never been as public as when he left Marvel after the bankruptcy.
Yeah.
Because that's when we all started going online, and there were all the news about Stan Lee Media on the first comic book websites. Yeah. So that's a part of his life that everybody remembers.
Yeah, but it's interesting because the little review or promo I read of it was from some mainstream magazine like Fortune or something. I can't even remember. And they were saying stuff like, well, for people who only know Stan Lee from his movie cameos and such, which is just about everybody, it's going to be controversial to them.
I think I read the same one. Was it from Forbes?
Yeah, maybe it was Forbes.
I think somebody sent that out. I think I saw that same one.
Yeah. Did he do racing comics, Paolo?
Yeah, I'm answering in the chat.
Okay. Racing comics.
Yeah, the only racing-related comics I can remember here in the States, granted it's not something I've delved into, was Alex Toth.
Yeah, Hot Wheels.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I have to say, what book was that? Oh, God, the one that disappointed me in the end. Deadly Class.
I'm not familiar with that.
Issue like 6 of Deadly Class or something had one of the best chase scenes in comics I've ever seen. Because it's really hard to do chase scenes in comics. That's not something easy. Yeah, that's not easy to get across.
I could see how that would be difficult.
Yeah, and that had one of the best chase scenes. That's right. Charlton Comics had a few racing series, right? Back in the day. Now I remember those.
Yeah,
Jack Keller, the guy who did Kid Colt Outlaw for Marvel for 14 years.
Oh yeah,
he worked on those. And I know there were a few issues from those series which were published in Portugal in 1969, I think.
I was just reading something about Charlton Comics. God, it's funny. You read stuff on the internet. I don't even know where I read it. Yeah. It's like, where did I read that? It was a brief history of Charlton Comics, and I think it was about the book that's supposed to be coming out too on Charlton Comics, and how they had everything under one roof. But I didn't realize that that eventually became its downfall. Well, there was two things that were tried. I'd heard of the flood before. Are you guys familiar with that?
I heard the flood with Eclipse, but not with Charlton.
It happened with Charlton first, like 20 years earlier.
Gotcha.
Charlton Comics. I mean, because Charlton Comics had their entire operation under one roof. They had printing presses, they had artists, they had so everything happened, which is why he made comics, because he wanted those printing presses running 24/7, because he owned them, the owner of Charlton.
Right.
So that's why they made comics. And then one day there's a famous flood in like the 60s or 70s, I can't remember when it was, that the entire property was under 18 feet of water.
Ooh.
I mean, it just wrecked everything. Yeah. I think it was the 60s.
I had seen some still photographs of the flood that they had at Eclipse's warehouse.
Right.
And that was nowhere near 18 feet, so I can just imagine how devastating that is.
As the 1% always do, the government bailed them out. but the guy just kept the money.
It's no good.
So he not only kept the money, he took it must have been the 50s. I think I remember that. Yeah, it was in the 50s.
Okay.
He not only kept the money, he then made an announcement that because of the flood and everything was so damaged, he cut everyone's pay rate in half. And they weren't, they weren't making a lot of money to begin with. They had the worst pay rates in the business. And I think they said they cut it from like $14 a page for like pencils down to $7 a page. And it took another 10 years until the mid 60s to get back up to $14 a page, which was still dirt cheap. It wasn't like that was a lot, but it was interesting to read. I was a famous flood too.
I'm going to say maybe the wrong company had the name Slave Labor Graphics.
Charlton's founders met in jail.
Yeah, that's they had that in the one guy was in jail for being a con man, basically.
Yeah, and one was in jail for copyright violation.
Right. The original, what it was this is the articles. The guy who the original guy who owned Charlton, he was an immigrant, right off the boat immigrant. This is like in the 30s. I forget. I can't remember if he was Italian or Jewish or something. One of those, not really welcomed immigrants. He wasn't a blue blood from England coming over here. And so he bought a small press right away and just started printing stuff. He didn't know anything about copyright. He was just straight off the boat, making his money, printing stuff. Right. And eventually he just didn't even care. And they caught him and threw him in jail. And then when he got out, it was music he was printing. Yeah. He was printing, because back in those days, there was no pre-recorded music. So you bought the music notes and played a song, and bought that and played that on your own piano. That's how it's amazing to think that's how you got music.
They were pre-recorded, their recordings, but I don't think records had lyrics on the notes at that time. So if you wanted to know the lyrics of a popular song, you had to listen to it, or the guy started printing the books with a. There's one thing that I find it ridiculous is the idea that that musicians are financially affected if you print the lyrics.
Well,
they're not a substitute.
Nowadays, you're not. I don't think
it depends. One of the things that Steve I always said, one of the two smartest things he did when he started out in his music career was he got a good lawyer.
Oh yeah.
And he retained all the rights and copyrights to his publishing.
Who was that?
Steve Vai, the guitar player.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Yeah. Well, that's not easy to do if you want to be a pop musician. Right. But then he was in jail for copyright infringement of the music, and he met his partner. I forget the other guy, and who was in jail for being a con man of some kind, I think. Right. They formed Charlton publication. But what did them in the end, I didn't realize this, was that, like I said, they owned their own presses, which suited them very well for 30 years. Yeah. But by the time the 70s rolled around, their presses were so old and technology had moved on from then, that they would either have to buy new presses, which the guy wasn't going to do, or they're just going to have their presses were so old and bad by that time they couldn't compete. And I remember buying Charlton comics in like the late 70s, and they looked like they were from the 50s.
Yeah,
I mean, they really did.
Yeah, the print registers on those weren't the greatest, were they?
No. So the fact that they owned their own presses and didn't want to replace them, because a lot of people are like, well, the fact that their own presses really did them in the end. I'm like, no, that didn't do them in. What did them in was they didn't want to replace them.
Mm-hmm. The thing about the presses is that you buy a new one, and as soon as you finish paying them, you buy another one.
Right. That he didn't want to do the cap because he didn't want to. I mean, that happens to a lot of old businesses. You don't want to invest in capital anymore. You're so used to making money with all your capital investments paid off that you don't want to have capital investments anymore. I think that happens to a lot of old businessmen.
Sure.
When they're individuals rather than a corporation, of whoever.
Fascinated me to see how just interesting some of the history of the different comics companies were.
Oh.
Some of them were just like, really?
Yeah. Have you read the Drew Friedman books, Heroes of the Comics?
No, I've
read them.
I know that they exist, but I haven't read them.
They just have 1,000 words. They have a Drew Friedman drawing of whoever the guy is, and maybe 1,000 words on them. And I just find that book endlessly fascinating. I just started it up. It's one you can pick up and read one page of and put down.
That's one of the things I like about. There was a series that DC did under another printing subline. I can't remember what they were called. Factoid books, I think.
Mm-hmm.
They did the big book of, hoaxes, the Old West.
Right. Was that Piranha Press?
I'm sorry?
Was that Piranha Press or no?
It might have been, or it started at Piranha and then changed the name of the subdivision later. But those are ones you can read 1 or 2 page stories and put it down and come back to it later.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really know who has the rights to reprint those, because I think they're long out of print because Paradox Press hasn't existed for over a decade.
Yeah, that
Paradox Press. They were
Paradox. But then I don't know. I know that DC likes to hold on to the rights, but this type of stuff that I think they have to reprint, and I don't know who would be interested in doing them.
That's one of the reasons that Heavy Metal never got a complete. They wanted to do a CD-ROM at one time.
Right.
Back from issue 1, and then Steve Bissett brought up, "Hey, you guys don't actually own the rights to do that."
Hey, look, Jeff is with us.
That fell through with it.
Gentlemen.
Hello, Jeff.
There.
Yeah, how you doing?
Doing pretty well. Jeff filling in for Tim tonight. I sent him. I was like,
I'll be your temporary Tim. Ask me any Tim-related questions. I have insight.
Some men call him Jeff.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you're looking very average today.
Yeah. Anyway, how y'all doing? Read any good comic books lately?
I was about to show mine off for this week, but we were just talking about Paradox Press and rights. Do you remember the big books that DC used to produce, like Book of Hoaxes and big? We were just wondering who owns the rights to that.
That's an interesting.
Was that creator owned, or did that?
I doubt it, but I could be wrong.
Wow, yeah, that information's like way back in my head somewhere, because those were a going thing for a long time. I guess they stopped making them.
But since some of you guys were freelance, it's hard to tell where the rights might be on that.
I know
Piranha Press, I think, was creator owned. Gregory.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. What your Piranha Press was a different subdivision, right?
I know people that got royalties off of it, so I don't know how that works out with the ownership exactly, but people were absolutely getting paid for what they were doing. It was a cool program. I guess they stopped, huh?
Yeah, it hasn't been out in a long time, but it's around for a good, 5 years.
Yeah, we were just talking about like books you can pick up and read 1 or 2 pages of, and I use that as an example of that sort of thing. So
no book I got that read real well that way. I got the Evan Dorkin, the collected sci-fi fantasy club.
Yeah, all the Dorkin stuff is meant to be like 2 pages max. I mean, occasionally he goes longer, but
even the stuff that went longer, I found reading 2 pages because it's so dense and full of anger because the characters are so angry. But I found myself, I enjoyed it much more when I just read a couple of pages and put it down. The next day, came back and read a couple of, and I loved it like that.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Because you sit down and you read Eltingville, like you sit down to read an Eltingville collection, and it's like bathing in sweat. It's just awful.
Yeah. It's tough to take sometimes.
Complain. I mean, I agree that we're terrible and everybody we know is terrible and we're horrible people. Like, sure, but
and there's also so much chicken fat in there. There's stuff to look at. So the Will Elder chicken fat. So it's just like, wow.
Yeah, Dorkin fills a page, man. I like that guy.
Have you guys been keeping up with Evan Dorkin's posts and things on social media the past couple of years?
Yeah, I haven't seen him on tour.
Going through some rough times.
Yeah.
Oh, I've never seen a picture of him. He looks like the lead singer of the Mountain Goats.
Whoever they are.
Oh, holy crap.
I love when Jeff names some completely obscure band like everybody knows who they are.
It's not obscure to me and my Facebook friends.
They all go to the same bar, and they're always playing, right?
Mountain Goats did a song for the 8th Star Wars movie.
Oh, okay. Then they're not that obscure if they're on a Star Wars soundtrack. I stand corrected.
Yeah, here we go. It's called The Ultimate Jedi Who Wastes All the Other Jedi and Eats Their Bones. It's a terrible song. It's just terrible. But if you look it up, you'll see like John Darnell. Wow, that dude looks like Evan Dorkin. Brings it back full circle. No, I strongly recommend the Mountain Goats. If we have a second for a digression, this like sort of ties into my own work in a lot of ways. But the Mountain Goats wrote a song called "Lovecraft in Brooklyn," which is why I ended up doing my comic book Bust of Lovecraft, because it's a song about how he's having a really bad day and he feels like H.P. Lovecraft in Brooklyn. And so I went and I Googled it, and it turns out that H.P. Lovecraft, it didn't go wrong for him like all at once. His life was a slow decay, and his time in Brooklyn was actually really, really bad. He had a miserable time, and he lived in a place called Red Hook. So I'm like, okay, and I Googled Red Hook. I'm like, what else has happened in Red Hook? Because that sounds like a Lovecraft place. And it turned out that they filmed real world Brooklyn there, and that Busta Rhymes was from Red Hook.
Red Hook was one of the neighborhoods that turned real bad after oh God, what's his name? The power broker.
Robert Moses, yes.
After Robert Moses built the highways to cut off the black neighborhoods.
He sure did.
Red Hook was one of those black neighborhoods that he cut off from the rest of the city and let decay.
Yeah, Paul, Scott, I don't know if you've heard of Robert Moses, but Robert Moses is like one of the true nightmares. He's the Hitler of urban planning. Like, I'm not just exaggerating mildly here. Like, he's a really, really bad dude. And you still can't take a subway to Red Hook to this day. So I realized that, H.P. Lovecraft was a troubled individual and was wrong a lot. Like, H.P. Lovecraft was so racist that people in the 1920s were like, dude, you're racist.
Now, from what I understand, I'm not a Lovecraft scholar like S.T. James.
I know almost nothing about him.
Yeah.
From what I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, did Lovecraft kind of reverse some of his views later on in his life?
Yes, around 1941, or actually from 1939 to 1941, when he was dying of metal poisoning because he was living on tinned fish. He had a realization that Hitler was not good and anti-Semitism was bad. And for the last couple of years of his life, he actually tried to turn over a new leaf. But I mean, he was just, he's a weird dude. He's a weird dude in a lot of ways. It's very strange. Oh, sorry.
It's fascinating because he had a long correspondence history with Robert E. Howard. And those letters are then published, and they're really interesting to read.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Robert E. Howard
ideas back and forth off of each other. It's pretty interesting stuff.
Robert E. Howard's pure Texas. I don't know if you all know Texas at all, but Robert E. Howard, like Conan the I never understood Conan the Barbarian until I lived in Texas. But okay, but to finish off the first story and then move on without digressing too much. So I looked it up and I was like, wow, Busta Rhymes is literally like the shouting cultist from an H.P. Lovecraft book. And I was like, in my comic book mind, I was like, well, obviously they need to team up, but that would never happen. Like, I love them both, but they would not have enjoyed each other's company. Busta Rhymes is an outspoken man who would not put up with H.P. Lovecraft's crap. So I wrote a comic book about H.P. Lovecraft and Busta Rhymes getting in a fist fight.
Lovecraft shows up as a secondary character in a lot of different comics.
He's a trouble. To put H.P. Lovecraft in proper historical context is very difficult, because if you got anybody from the 1920s and you brought him back to life and you were like, hey, guess who's the most famous of the Pulp Fiction writers? H.P. Lovecraft. They'd be like, you mean the guy that writes the fan letters?
Yeah.
I can't even. It would be like if somebody wrote the history of Marvel Comics and just decided that we were in charge of Marvel Comics. It makes no sense.
T.M. Maple was the head of Marvel Comics just because of letters.
Yeah. I mean, he had nothing to do with anything during his life. He was completely forgotten, not relevant in any way. His big breakthrough was he wrote a short story for Harry Houdini that Harry Houdini didn't like. So,
well, it's like the only reason we know Shakespeare these days, or there was like 2 or 3 dedicated fans who kept his work in print.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's what it takes.
Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, and it doesn't help Shakespeare at all. He was dead by the time it happened.
I mean, conversely,
comic fans
all over the freaking world.
Yeah. It's just you can't predict how the future is going to see you, I guess.
Right.
No, should you want to? But yeah.
Was T.M. Maple the one? I can't remember if it was him or another letter hack because he died like in the early 2000s or something, pretty young. Mm-hmm. But there was something controversial about him when people found out who he was. I can't remember. That may have been someone else. I can't remember.
Didn't T.M. Maple turn out to be a woman or something?
No. He's got a Wikipedia page, though.
He's got a Jim Burke. He wrote more than 3,000 letters, and I read about half of them, I'd say.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Prolific.
You need people like that. I mean, you really do. Those letter pages and the back pages of comics were so important, and that's something that the internet's just wiped out. Like, you can't really... You see people that try to do letters pages now. Right?
Even like Savage Dragon, Eric Larson has a very lively letters page in that. I never read the letters.
Yeah.
They're just too small to type, and I don't know. I just not in the habit. But he's got like a lot of letters in there every issue, but I can't seem to read them.
Well, it used to be that was the only way that you could even begin to communicate with the other fans. Like unless
you had some in your school, which wasn't that likely. I had a few friends who collected comics growing up, but not a lot.
Yeah, no, I had a few friends that enjoyed comics, but definitely nowhere near as much as me.
Yeah, but I would have to say, I think in hindsight, I had more friends who were into comics, especially when I went away to art school, than most comic fans did. Because when I was growing up, my immediate neighbors collected comics, 2 of them. One stopped, the other kind of tapered off, but they collected through most of junior high. Right. Not really into high school, but by that time, like in high school, I met my friend Rob, who's my one high school friend still, and we've been going to the comic shop every week up until COVID. But I still meet him, and we hang out at the comic shop and talk comics. And then I had one friend who I think I met in junior high who was like 2 years older than me, and I knew him all through high school. I didn't know him after high school, but he was like the guy who was 2 years older than me who would always say, "Oh, you got to read these comics." Like he would tell me about all the comics that were before my time. Hmm. So I was lucky to have him too. And then when I went away to college, there was more comic fans there because I was in art school than in your average world. And then of course after college I worked at Marvel, and a lot of my friends who were comics fans in college worked at Marvel with me. So definitely more than your average person, I've had comic fans around.
More than your average bear.
Oh God, you all have me reading about T.M. Maple now.
Was there anything controversial about him? You let me. What year did he die?
His force to go down rabbit holes of obscurity.
Well, he died young. I think it was.
Yeah,
he had a heart attack at age. That does 38 does seem young these days, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Basically,
younger and younger.
Yeah, any age seems young now after you surpass it.
My favorite of the DC letter hacks, if he's even out there anymore, is a fellow named Mark Hayden Frazier, who wrote a letter to practically every issue of Ambush Bug.
Yeah, I don't remember him.
Oh, there's very few people who ever loved Ambush Bug as much as I did. That was my favorite.
I loved the first miniseries of Ambush Bug, and there was diminishing returns after that.
Right.
I haven't read it in 30 years.
I'm a big fan of Ambush Bug.
Yeah. I got to ask, which is your favorite issue of Ambush Bug?
Probably Nothing Special.
Ooh, that was a good one.
Yeah.
That was a good one. I really enjoyed Quaintus, the koala that walked like a man.
When somebody told me that Ambush Bug was going to show up on the World's Finest animated,
I
was like, what? What planet am I in, like Bizarro World now that Ambush Bug actually gets, some love shown to him after 30 some years?
Dude, I want to point out that Comic Crack is now only the second person beside myself who has a copy of Night Streets #1. I have the whole series, 1 through 5. It was a black and white. I guess it was part of the black and white boom after the Turtles in the 80s. And I haven't read it in a long, long time, but I remember enjoying that one enough to buy like the 4 or 5 issues that came out. It was kind of this slice of life crime story, except like the guy, I can't remember if it was the crime boss or the guy fighting the crime boss was a giant cat. Other than that, everybody was kind of normal, and it was kind of like,
It's like a rough draft for Black Sat or something.
Yeah, it was weird. Oh, the first Ambush Bug.
Run into other series that seem fairly normal and mundane, but just have one particular aspect that sticks out as abnormal.
Yeah, I can't remember if they did 4 or 5 issues. Matter of fact, let me walk over to my here and see if I can.
Cerebus would be like the greatest comic of all time, right?
I bet he doesn't have a complete run of Street Poet Ray.
We got 5 issues of Night Streets. Here, let me see if I can.
Wow, you found them that fast?
Yeah.
Wow.
There's Night Streets. Let me get this out of the way. Hide. There's Night Streets #1. There's Night Streets #2. There's the cat.
That's the cat, yeah.
There's the cat. Night Streets #3. Night Streets #4. There's the cat. I don't have to read these. As a matter of fact, these are going to go. I'll show you that. And Night Streets #5. Let's see. Where's this?
What's the publisher on this?
Let me get that. Let me exit solo layout. It's back of Night Streets #4 has boobs.
Oh, that's 1986 boobs right there.
Yeah.
I just want to point out that the Mountain Goats are too obscure, but you have Night Streets 1 per 5.
Yeah. But I know this is obscure. That's why I find it funny that Terrence Comic Crack got them. This is by Arrow Comics.
Okay.
Mark Bloodworth. Oh, no, that's the copyright. Printed in Canada. Windsor, Ontario.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Near T.M. Maple's house.
M.I., that's Michigan, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and by Bloodworth is the name of the artist, I guess. But it was a crime comic with a giant cat. They have a next issue is the conclusion of Mob Rules. I guess there was never concluded. I don't know. At least if I had it on my pull list, if there was a 6th issue, you'd think I would have got it. But I remember, I guess it didn't ever end. I don't have to see if there was ever a 6th issue published. But this issue was 87. Let's see when the first issue was. But I remember it being well written. Or at least 20-year-old Jared thought it was well written.
I'll take your word for it. I mean,
looking from here,
July 86.
It's a shame it got canceled because the cover art was finally getting to professional level.
Yeah.
Because the first one, it kind of looks like a guy who's trying to draw something cool but doesn't know how.
Yeah, I think.
By the time you get 4, the cover to #4 is already very, very good. That's probably the best of the bunch. And #5 at least looks professional enough. So yeah, if he could have gone on.
Yeah.
I don't understand how do you people come up with 80s comics that I've never heard of? This is just...
Because I was at the comic shop every week in the 80s buying indie comics.
I lived at comic book shops in the 80s.
I mean, usually I'll have an inkling of something, but I don't remember that title at all.
No, no one remembered. Like I said, Terrence is Terrence, who loves to buy old, obscure, underground comics and whatever else he can find, is the only one I've ever seen with these, and he bought them like a month ago. So it's like that. It's not unusual that you don't know Night Streets. Let's put it that way.
No.
I'm the only one I know who knows Night Streets,
except for Terrence.
There's a reprint series.
What was that weird John Byrne clone you came up with last week, Jared?
Oh, like he was better known. He was better known than that. Phase One Phasers. Phase One was the name of it. By was named just full. He was hot for like a brief moment in the mid '80s. All of a sudden, I can't remember his name. But yeah, he drew kind of like John Byrne in the mid '80s, and did an indie book called Phase One Phasers. And I couldn't find my copies of them. They should be right over where those are under F, but they weren't. So I was very upset.
Yeah, I just looked it up, and it says that they were trying to sell me speakers. So I'm not sure we have the title right. But...
Vic Bridges. There we go. Vic Bridges is the guy's name.
Oh my God. I am not used to people that can outdo me on 80s comic book trivia. It's like they're going to know the Legion of Superheroes better than I do.
Vic Bridges
knows a lot of stuff. Mind the Comics knows a lot of stuff.
Vic Bridges did Freak Force, which was actually fairly good sometimes. Do you remember Freak Force?
He did that?
Yeah.
That was an Eric Larson book, right?
Yeah, that was Larson and Giffen. You know,
right.
That comes under the heading of Giffen. If you all start beating me at Giffen trivia, I'm going to cry.
I'm guessing that Eric Larson remembered Vic Bridges from the mid '80s and tracked him down.
Yeah, Freak Force was really quite good. Much better than much better than I thought it was going to be.
I never read Freak Force. I'll have to try. I might have a couple issues of it somewhere that came with some of my Savage Dragon lots.
It was more of a story than you were used to from a superhero comic in the day. And actually, they got Dave Johnson. Like Dave Johnson's first work was on Freak Force and Super Patriot. Okay. And Dave Johnson's really good.
Yeah. He's done a lot of nice covers. He used to have that blog where he broke down bad covers, but he got into too much trouble for it.
Oh, really? I'd like to read that.
Become a reverend as well.
What was that?
Did Dave Johnson also become an ordained reverend as well?
I have no idea.
It seems like something stick in the back of my mind that he did, but I'm not 100% sure.
Well, maybe he got into the that Universal Life Church thing where you give them $30 and you can marry people. That's pretty cool. I've got some friends that did that.
I think I have in one of my old computers a certificate that I can that I'm a minister. Downloaded off the internet.
Yeah. Did you join the Church of the Subgenius there, Colin?
Yeah. I think that was
salvation or triple your money back. That's hard to beat.
No. There's a reprint series for Night Streets.
There is?
Yeah, from Caliber Press in 1990.
Wow.
They reprinted three issues per book, and the second one as the unpublished story that was supposed to finish it.
The unpublished 6th issue. Look at that. Who knew?
Yeah. So it's 1, 2, and 3 on number 1, and 4, 5, and the unpublished 6 in number 2.
Look at that.
Caliber Comics.
You bring up Caliber Press and then the word street. Do you remember 221B Baker Street from Guy Davis?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I do. And there was
guys no longer doing comics.
Well, Caliber Comics is a long time ago now, but they had a comic.
Yeah.
Exit? Do you
Wrong
remember?
word, Caliber.
Which one?
Exit.
Exit? Oh, I got the first issue of that at Sometimes. It's got a nice cover, like a guy in a boat.
Yeah, Nabil Kayan. That guy understood negative space better than practically anybody else in comics. I mean, he was. I guess you could say he was early decompressed storytelling because half of every page was empty. But the guy never had a problem making a monthly deadline. So what are you arguing about? But he was really good. Caliber put out a lot of really good stuff. There's some sort of.
They put out an anthology book. I'm trying to remember. I can see it in my brain, but I can't remember the title of it. That'll drive me crazy till I think of it.
Well, who wants to see what comic I got this
Negative
week?
Burn? Was that Caliber or was that?
Yeah, that was Caliber. That was their anthology.
Yeah.
book.
Negative Burn. Yeah, that's the book.
Yeah, Negative Burn was quite good. All right, what'd you get? I'm curious.
This is the first one. I got Once and Future. This is issue 15, right? 15. Hard to believe there's 15 issues of this so far. This is the one that's all about Grandma Buffy the Vampire Slayer fighting monsters from Old English books and poems.
Right.
And this was a particularly good issue because we got into a little more of the family dynamics where our lead character is Grandma Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and her grandson, who she raised to be Galahad, basically, who he knew nothing about his grandmother fighting monsters. But meanwhile, he's estranged from his own mother. And in this, because for what reasons they never got into, but in this we get into the reasons, and the reason is because the grandmother and the mother are at odds with each other. And we think the grandmother's the hero, but in this we get a little twist where maybe the grandmother isn't the hero. Maybe the grandmother's a little more twisted than we think, and she's gone off the deep end, and the mother's the hero. So that was an interesting twist in this issue.
Yeah.
But I really, this was one of my favorite issues of it in a while. I really liked kind of that. And then at the end, the government gets involved too. That was a new twist too. The British government, because so far in the 14 issues, it's just been Grandma Buffy and her grandson, and she keeps trying to keep the authorities out of it because she's like, they just screw up and people die.
They'll just want me to join their League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
Right. So at the end of this issue, too, we also get the government shows up. And you're like, oh, there's another twist. What does the government know? Who knows? So I really enjoyed that issue. It was good stuff. It's been a good series. It's Kieran Gillen and Dan Mora with Tamara Bonvillain on the colors. But good stuff so far. And then I picked up 3 first issues. The first one I picked up is Crimson Flower by Matt Kindt and Matt Lysniewski, who I only know from Twitter, and I've never bought any of his. He's got this weird style, this weird. And if you see on Twitter, he sometimes does. He sometimes does commissions of like Marvel heroes and stuff, and they're all in this weird, distorted, skinny style.
It sort of looks like the Hot Wheel art, you know.
Yeah, there's definitely some hot rod art from the 60s in it.
Thank you. That's the word. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that's what you were looking for. And it was a pretty good first. I generally like Matt Kindt drawing his own stuff rather than someone drawing it for him. But this worked pretty well. I mean, it was just, see, what was this story about again? I haven't read it the second. Oh, it's about this woman investigating stuff. No, this wasn't what is she? Is she she wasn't the journalist. Oh, she's tracking down, her father was killed by an assassin when she was a kid. So now she's all grown up and looking for the assassin. And it's just weird. There's weird stuff. Matt Kindt loves worldwide conspiracies and stuff like that, and superpowered teams. And there's stuff like that going. And there's just weird stuff where she's going to find out more about her father than she wanted to know. But I actually put this one on my pull list before it came out because I just liked the creative team. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to buy that one. So that one's already on the pull list. And here's one that didn't quite make the pull list. And that's Abbott 1973. And it turns out there was already a series because there's recaps of the series. And then it was, I really liked some of the art. Like, I love that fashion reference splash right there. Nice stuff. That's some nice art. But the story just, I just found the writing a little clunky. And the story is about, it takes place in 1973, and she's an investigative journalist with magical powers, too. She's like the defender of the light or something. So it takes place in Detroit in 73 with a mostly black cast, and she's working at at a black newspaper, and Detroit's about to elect its first black mayor, which is a big story. So it's kind of this slice of life with magic going on too. So it was
winner.
I didn't find the balance. I found the balance a little weird. I kind of wanted one or the other. But I like this cover, but I don't think this one's going on my pull list. But it was okay.
Yes and no, sir.
What was that?
It all keeps things quiet because there's a lot of family stuff going on in my life right now. But
oh, that's what it is.
I'm not completely. I can either confirm or deny. But yeah, it's also just to keep things quiet and force people, as you can see, to open the door a little slower.
Right.
My family does not take this podcast as seriously as I do.
That's right. The Freak is Matt Lesniewski's other book. I think that's the one he did that I've never bought. Like I said, I somehow ended up finding his stuff on Tumblr back in the day. And now, since no one's on Tumblr, I find him on Twitter.
Yeah.
Of the word freak, did you know there is now an animated version of the Fabulous Furry Freak Brothers?
Oh, I heard something about that.
I did not know that. That's sort of fascinating. How would that work? I mean, they're not super artistic.
They're little short segments. They're like 10 to 15 minutes long, something like that.
Well, that's super cool.
Yeah.
This is my only Fabulous Furry Freak Brothers. And I only made it that far through.
Pretty sizable volume, though.
Yeah. You don't smoke pot, Jared.
I haven't touched it in years. It's fun, but it's a little repetitive.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
2008, I got this.
Right.
That's an Austin thing. Like, those guys that guy ruled Austin for quite a while. And actually, if you go to Austin now, you'd still see their art everywhere and their style of art everywhere.
Gilbert Shelton.
Yeah.
Here's a little ad insert for the movie.
Okay.
From comic book to is it actually out? Did it ever actually get made? Or
it looks as though, yeah. I'm looking at it's actually sort of cool animation. They did a good job on the background. It's actually more complicated than the comic, to be honest.
Yeah, a lot of people complaining about the voices they didn't like.
This is them asking for money to get the movie made. Interesting.
Oh, they got Davidson to play one of the characters. Do the Freak Brothers have names?
Yeah.
Yeah, they do.
They
do. Wow.
The only ones I remember are Fat Freddy and Fat Freddy's cat.
Right.
So Woody Harrelson, John Goodman, Tiffany Haddish, who I don't know, and Pete Davidson.
I remember memorizing their names at some point, but I don't remember them now.
Can you guess one of them?
So I could tell them apart. I memorized their names.
Yeah. Yeah, they really sort of cross the line where characters matter. You know, it's just they take turns talking. I don't think they ever really were different. So Jared's inspired me, and I've been buying a couple comics lately. I guess it's I mentioned this before, but like first off, I always got to read. I get Kaiju Max every month because I adore Kaiju Max, and I like Xander a lot as a person. So the new issue of Kaiju Max is much the same as all the other issues.
Yeah. It's a good comic, but it's tough. It's like every month I try to find something new to say about Usagi Yojimbo, and Besides saying Sakai is a master storytelling and every issue is good, what do you say?
Yeah, he cuts stuff in half with a sword. And
it's like I've been buying Usagi Yojimbo, talking about it for 30 years. It's like,
yeah. It's like Lone Wolf. Did you ever try to read all of Lone Wolf and Cub?
I read a lot of it. I read all the first comic stuff.
I read them all. And let me tell you, that is a repetitive comic.
Well, one of the reasons I never read it is because I hate those tiny little reprint volumes that Dark Horse did.
Yeah, what are you supposed to do? Those don't fit in your pocket? I don't know what you're supposed to do.
I don't like it. The first comics were bigger than that.
Yeah.
Charles Vesta's studio, and he had the original. I don't think they were actually printed in Japanese. I think somebody else may have reprinted them in English. And they were full size. They were almost like European album format size.
I think recently they've reprinted
them. I
them.
look at those like, wow, these are a hell of a lot better than those tiny little things that Dark Horse did.
Yeah, I want to see the lines.
When Bunch worked at DC Comics, someone there tried to tell him that Lone Wolf and Cub was printed because when Dark Horse first came out with those smaller editions,
right?
They tried to tell everybody that's the size it was printed at in Japan. That was in their advertising and stuff.
Well, there may have been, other cheaper versions. Like I know.
Well, our friend Bunch already had them in Japanese in the full size volumes.
Yeah,
and so he was working at I think DC Comics when they came out with the Japanese, and someone at DC tried to tell him that. He's like, really?
And that stuff is glorious now, just because we're so used to computers and everything being easy. But the days when you would actually fill a page with motion lines with a brush, it's actually sort of exciting. But after 30 volumes, it's not exciting anymore. There's actually a volume, I think it's like 26 or 27, where the main character actually, every issue is the same. They come to a new town, they kill everybody, they leave. At one point, he actually kills everybody in the town in his sleep. He's dreaming, and they attack him in his sleep, and he kills them all. And you're like, okay, they're really out of ideas. But
I guess the Freak Brothers movie was never made. Franklin, Fat Freddy, and Phineas.
So Phineas was one of the other ones. Okay.
I feel like
there's a dub band in New Zealand. They're called Fat Freddy's Drop. They're actually quite well known in Europe.
And the last
Max all at the same time. There is progress. Like this one is all about like evil Pikachu. Pikachu is Tony Soprano.
Oh yeah, that was
a Pikachu other than evil. So.
Yeah, well, they ask the tough questions about
each season has sort of a different theme.
Yeah,
I didn't read season 1. It's funny. It was Sleepy Reader who got me reading Kaiju Max because he bought season 1 and always said it was good. So when season 2 came out, I started there. Season 2 was about a monster out on parole.
Yeah.
And like season 3 was about something, I can't remember, something else. And season 4 was about monster gangs in the prison. And this season 5 was Law and Order. It was about like the prison and the court systems.
Yeah. Yeah.
We got to see a lot of the justice system. And it's like in this virtual space where everybody from like all the giant monsters and their defenders and the lawyer, the process can all be in this virtual space together. And
and Xander's like a real fan of kaiju. Like he really understands and cares about kaiju. So it's filled with Easter eggs and stuff like that.
Yeah. I don't get any of the Easter eggs, but Bunch finally started reading it like last year, and he of course gets all the Easter eggs and told me about them all. I forgot about them.
I didn't read it.
Tanner and his brother did. It's called Bone Sharps and Thunder Lizards about Cope and the other guy, I can't remember his last name, who were competitive fossil hunters back in the late 1800s.
Okay.
Well, yeah. The book is really, really good.
Yeah, his brother's really good. He did I think we talk about this once? He did a comic called Far Northern or something like that. Were we talking about this or was this elsewhere?
I don't know.
I can't remember.
I know we talked about Replacement God a couple of times.
Yeah, it must have been here. Anyway, they're good. Okay. I'll be right back, y'all.
Okay.
I'll wait for him to show the fourth comic.
Yeah, I like Xander Cannon's work a lot. I just I've never come across.
I've never run across him in Two Kaiju Max. That's the first I've. But when I do my YouTube video every week where I show off what comics I got, and I also do the quick version on Instagram, and I always tag Kaiju Max, and Xander Cannon must keep track of his tag because he always likes whenever I post when I get it. So I know he's out there. Whenever I'm like I said, I do. It's just like an under a minute version of my comic haul for Instagram, and I post on Twitter too. But I always like, wow, these comic books should all have their own hashtags these days. Because it makes it so much. Because sometimes I like, because I always hashtag the comics I bought, but some of them are so generic that it's like, oh, they need their own hashtag here. Right. And usually I put comic after it, but even then it's usually like less than 100 of these, less than 1,000 of these right. Once and future hashtag isn't a lot. And Crimson Flower. I guess Crimson Flower is pretty unique. So, but some of them just aren't unique hashtags.
Well, so if you hashtag once in the future, you're going to get a lot of the T.H. White books coming back.
Yeah. So I generally would put like once in future comic or something like that. No, it's weird too, because this once in future has the ampersand.
Right.
And as soon as you put an ampersand in a tag on Instagram, it can't find anything.
Interesting.
So you type in once, and it starts brings up a list of all the onces.
Right.
As soon as you put that ampersand in, there goes the list.
There it goes.
Yeah, ampersands are usually used in code to mean something else. So you can't use them to literally. You have to use a substitute.
Right. I just found that interesting. It's like, oh, that made it disappear. No, it's another weird title that, the comic, The Wicked and the Divine. Good comic. Another Kieran Gillen one, as a matter of fact.
Does it also have an ampersand in it?
It's got a plus. It's actually The Wicked plus the Divine. And it's like, no one ever pronounces it that way, but it's actually The Wicked plus the Divine.
Gotcha.
I was like, that's weird, because I always found myself calling it The Wicked and the Divine, and then I'd look at it and go, oh, it's The Wicked plus the Design. Not even an ampersand.
Gotcha.
But I also want to point out, if you look at my name now, I've got jaredosborne.com, because I finally got my jaredosborne.com site up and running again.
Oh, you got a domain?
Cool.
That's cool.
In that I had it for years as sort of an artist site where you could go and see samples of my work.
Mm-hmm.
But sometime around 10 or 12 years ago, at the when social media got really big, no one goes to individual websites anymore.
I'm one of those weird people that still do, but yeah, you're right.
There are, but no one goes to mine, especially. Gotcha. If you're John Byrne and you've got Byrne Robotics, somebody's going to go to your website. But it's like people use social media now. So it was just kind of there for about 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
Then 2 years ago, something went wrong with it, and it just went down. Basically, there was if you were to go to jaredosborne.com, you'd see almost nothing.
Gotcha.
So finally, this week, on a couple weeks ago, my YouTube video, I decided I was going to make PDF books out of my old stuff and just kind of post it somewhere so people can get it.
Mm-hmm.
And for free. And I put a PayPal a PayPal address in the book saying, if you want to give me $1, you can. Otherwise, because otherwise, who cares? People aren't going to buy my stuff. I'm just not famous enough. So I turned to jaredosborne.com into just a link list. So it's like you can go there, and what I'm going to do over the course of this year is, as I get more PDFs of the first one I put up was the first 500 of my webcomic strips. I put it all in this one PDF book where you can just go to jaredosborne.com, click on the Dropbox link and download it and bring it to your phone or computer or iPad. So that's what I'm going to do with it now. I'm just going to put links there. So someone can go and find all mine. Like there's a link to my Instagram, there's a link to my YouTube. I just put up I also even put my
like your website's almost like an RSS feed for all your links.
Yeah. For just my stuff. I'm like, you know what? That's all it has to be now, because I still have Radiant Comics, which is where I post my blog and web comics, and there's a link for that there too. So it's like I'm just going to send people to that, and they can find all my stuff on social media or whatever. Matter of fact, that's where I made a PDF book. In 1994, December. That's when Marvel, I think Marvel they weren't quite in bankruptcy yet, but they were heading there. And at Marvel, I was always the guy who had a camera in his pocket. But most people, if you're young, you don't remember that people didn't have cameras in their pockets all the time. There was no cell phones. Very few people ever took pictures, day to day kind of thing. But I did. I used to keep a camera in my pocket. And I still didn't take as many because there were film cameras, which were expensive. I mean, in terms of you had to pay for processing. It was like, it's not like today where you just take pictures willy-nilly and it doesn't matter. It's all free because it's digital.
Right.
And it was December of 1994, and I decided to take a picture of everybody in the bullpen. I think it was like 36 people. Just because I was like, because we all knew something bad was about to come down. And I was just like, you know what? These people are never going to be in the same place ever again. So I took like everybody's picture. And then this past summer, I already had them scanned in, but I had to work on the pictures to get them up to snuff because they were scanned from 20 years later from dusty old negatives. And then I made them into a PDF book, portraits of everything, and I posted it on Facebook but you can go to jaredosborne.com if you want to see that PDF, even though you won't know anybody in it except maybe George Roussos and Jack Abel and Flo Steinberg. They're the only names you'll know. But it was all the behind-the-scenes bullpen people.
In Virginia Romita.
At jaredosborne.com too.
I actually I downloaded it and I found the interesting contrast between you wearing shorts and Jack Abel wearing a tie.
George Roussos, I think, was in the tie.
Yeah.
You think you can clear up something that's always confused me. Is the Dave Sharp that we worked with the famous Dave Sharp now, or the one who's still working, or is that a different Dave Sharp?
Dave Sharp is still doing lettering.
Yeah. So he was he around in '94? He was there when I was there. Yeah.
He's got a picture in there, but he was actually freelance at that time. He wasn't actually working he was working in the bullpen a little before there. Then he went freelance and was doing freelance lettering. And he happened to be stopping by that day. So I took a picture of him and included him because he's a bullpenner. And then in the late 90s to early 2000s, he was a bullpenner again because that's when Marvel went bankrupt and all the lettering work dried up. He came back and was a staff letterer again. Then in the early 2000s, he went freelance again and has been a freelance letterer ever since. And he's still out there doing lettering, Dave.
Yeah, he's a real interesting guy. I like him a lot.
A heavy metal born-again Christian.
Yeah, really into Warhammer and his kids. I respect it. I respect people who really commit to just like having a
loves Jesus and heavy metal.
Yeah, I don't want to call him a simple man because that sounds weird, but like he's a guy who knows what he likes and never has had a problem living it. I've always liked
he's a bright guy too. So
how does he earn money for both comics and Warhammer at the same time?
Yeah, he's a big gamer. He's a big man. Matter of fact, what I find he's got a son and a daughter who are both in their 20s now. I think his son is studying to be a pharmacist. I think his daughter is off at college too. But he like brought them up on gaming. Like they still have, Saturday night playing Magic the Gathering with, his daughter and son and friends and whoever. He moved out to Pennsylvania in the early 2000s.
I want to ask a question. Are any of you guys really versed in role-playing games?
Oh, yeah.
A little bit, not really versed.
All right, Jeff, I want to see what you think about this. The dynamic that you had with both Kirby and Stan Lee. There are so many parallels to that and the dynamic that you have with the tension between Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson. Those things parallel each other so much, it's ridiculous. Once you look at them and you draw the same conclusions, it's like almost a carbon copy of the same sort of story.
They had a good thing going. Yeah, I mostly know about the Steve Jackson side of the history.
Yeah.
Because of Austin and everything.
Raided by the FBI.
The FBI warehouse that was raided was actually literally next. I lived where it was gone by then. It was a field, and now it's a subdivision. But I lived literally over the hill from it. I had a bunch of friends that worked on the Illuminati cards and stuff like that. Because
cool.
Austin. I actually broke up with a girl once because she made me leave. Steve Jackson and Bruce Sterling were doing a symposium, and they were about to start talking, and she made me leave, and so I broke up with her, and that was maybe immature.
Wow.
I mean, I
really found my Illuminati cards recently.
Yeah.
I still have some. Let me show you the last comic I got this week because it was really, really good. I really enjoyed it. And it's Rain Like Hammers with this logo I can't read because the E's are backwards. It's a Brandon Graham comic. And it's funny because I saw this when I got my final order cutoff email. I saw this there, and it was like a $5 first issue. And I was like, I like Brandon Graham, but I don't know if I want to pay $5 for a first issue. But it's like a 60-page first issue. So I saw it on the shelf, and I'm like, I'll get it.
Oh, he's the King City guy. He worked on Prophet with Bear Dalrymple. Yeah, that guy's pretty good.
We mentioned him. We were trying to remember his name.
Yeah.
But I really enjoyed this. And at the end, he mentioned something that a genre of comics I have never heard of that this relates to. And it's called, what is this? Ayashiki is Japanese for healing, a term used for manga created with the purpose of having a healing or soothing effect. And I think that's how he was, and I could see what he was trying to do with it because I found it really soothing too. As I read it, I was like, "Oh, that's kind of interesting." It's almost like an ASMR comic.
You pulled the words right out of my mouth. That's exactly what I was going to say.
Now I want to see some interior pages. What's it look like?
Because there's a lot of repetition to it. First, let me explain it to you, then I'll show you some interior pages. It mostly takes place in this world where these giant cities are roaming around, I guess, and it doesn't give you a ton of backstory, but it's about this guy. He just got a promotion. He's working in this, I assume it's a big city on wheels that's roaming around whatever world they're in. And he goes and he does his job. And they show him like doing his job. He's like, oh, another 6 hours on this shift. And he's like, I'm glad I got this promotion, but it's lonely. He's trying, because he's in a new city where he doesn't know anyone. And it goes through kind of the stuff he eats. And it gives you sort of, you only have so many credits for food that week. So he eats the basic food at this night, and he saves up his good food for Friday night when his favorite TV show is on. So there's this kind of, you get into his routine and repetition, and it's very kind of peaceful. And then things happen. And another neat thing, this is what I want to show you the art of, is he's got, see these colors right here floating?
Yeah.
That's music.
Huh.
So he does this thing where somewhere in here they found these alien devices. And they don't quite know what they are. And they kind of change on them. But when you like play, basically if you plug headphones in them and hit play on these alien devices, it gives you something new, like music. And it's never the same thing twice. So he, like when he's doing his job, he sometimes turns that on, and as you can see here, there's a lot of gray in the ship he's in, but then the music is in all this color.
That looks really, yeah.
Sounds like you listen to 2112 now.
Right, and they show like there's pages of him eating, and like his food come in. Let me show you these kind of bubbles. There, let me. This is his food in this solid bubble, but then when you puncture it, it kind of like here he is puncture it. That's just like pieces of food in there. So it's like that's just kind of so everything's a little odd like that. Like the food doesn't come on a tray; it comes in this bubble, and then you pop the bubble, and there's little containers in the bubble. So it's very much about like the routine of this world. But then something happens, like I said, and this is like I think it feels like about 60 pages, so it's around there. It feels bigger than 48 even. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's only 48, but it feels like 60. I don't know if there's page numbers on it, and there aren't. So there's a lot of space to the story. And then at the end kind of the story, something happens to one of the other cities. They don't know what. So they have to race to the city to try to salvage whoever and whatever they can. And then I think something happens to their city too. It's like, and when they find out something happens to the other city, they go into emergency mode. So they kind of go into the routine of emergency mode. So there's sort of, I can see the healing and peacefulness of it in these routines and these routines with food and work. Yeah. So I found it really, I never heard of that, what was the name of it again? Type of Japanese comic.
I think, was it?
Iyashikei. Iyashikei. But, and it says here, Jiro Taniguchi's The Walking Man, 1992, is a favorite of mine. It feels like an element of storytelling in its purest form. It's all the kind of tactile life moments that are usually seen between the events that advance the plot in most comics. Its chapters focus on things like getting caught in a rainstorm and running home to take a hot bath. Or the main character walking his dog finds someone's lost lipstick and decides to leave it on a bench. Tactile. So it's like I'd never heard of that type of comic before. It's odd when you can find something I'd never heard of before.
Yeah, I've read Walking Man, and that's what it is. It's just walking around.
It is interesting. Yeah, it's a good one. Sleepy. I immediately put it on my pull list. There's at least one other issue coming out, but I very much enjoyed it. And I can't remember what I read of his before this that I kind of liked, but I really liked this one.
He's been working for a long time. He's done a lot.
He's been around for a while with his sort of Mobius Von Baudet style.
Yeah, that actually pretty much nails it, except there's a lot of manga. Like, did you read King City?
Yeah. I don't know if I read King's. I can't remember. I read one series of his, but I don't know what he's got. King City, Multiple Warheads, Prophet, and Royal Boiler. But I don't think it was one of those. I'm kind of like, what did I read of his?
Yeah, he's been around for a minute now that I think about it. Wow.
Was making manga produced mostly in the direct French market. That's interesting.
Are we allowed to read it? I mean, like that's
what was that?
Trying to skip over us there.
No, Taniguchi was a mangaka produced mostly in the direct French market.
Yeah, there are 2 or 3 Taniguchi books published here in Portugal as part of a newspaper graphic novel collection.
I've recently read The Solitary Gourmet, about a lonely man just visiting different restaurants in Tokyo. I'm gonna have to look up those because, like I said, I really enjoyed this one.
I would love to work in an industry that could support that, like where you do a comic book about like looking at horses in barns, and people would be like, "Yeah, sure, yeah, okay, you can."
Wouldn't it be great if the U.S. industry was like that? That'd be great.
Yeah. It's hard to get into that. I actually have some friends that work in the Portuguese industry, and it's hard for an American to get anywhere.
Yeah.
Well, Americans are kind of stuck in the U.S. because the only other place where they can make money is either French or Japan. The Japanese don't hire from outside, and the French are particular about the stuff that they want to publish.
Yeah,
they want you to demonstrate quality as a first time for a first time project that in the US would be reserved for working for Marvel.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the whole system where like you get an entire year to do 24 pages is pretty sweet. That doesn't happen over here. They want you to fill 120 pages at least in a year.
It's funny that there are so many foreign people working in American comics now that it's amazing. And I was just when I was trying to read the name of I was doing my Thursday video trying to read the names on this one. I was wondering out. It's Saladin Ahmed, Sami Kivela, and Matteo Iacona, and I was like, I'm not sure if this is a foreign comic or it was made in L.A. and New York.
Saladin Ahmed is American. Kivela is Finnish, and the other guy I can't tell.
Iacona, that could be Italian. Iacona,
Iacono, that's Italian. Yeah,
it does look.
Yeah, so I was like, well, this is. I'm like, people from around the world made this one. All the different ethnicities of the names just made me go.
Could be Argentinian though. Most Argentinians have Italian surnames.
Ah, okay.
It just struck me how ironic that comics creator should be an inker would come from Finland.
I was just learning about the conspiracy theory that Finland doesn't exist. I'd never heard that one.
It definitely does.
Well, a couple of there, so
that's an actual conspiracy theory that someone made up at some point, and other people believe it.
Yeah, we appear to have just left the golden era of conspiracy theories behind us, but it was.
Let's hope we did. I mean, I'm not saying we're out of it yet.
Yeah. Remains to be seen.
Oh, and here's something I remember. I forgot about this last week and brought it up after the broadcast. But new comic book company out there, Bad Idea, who I might be doing some production work for them at some time. I'm not sure yet.
Oh, that's cool.
Because I heard from, and this is the people doing this are the people behind the relaunch of Valiant from 10 years ago. So it's got, what is his name? Dinesh Shamdasani, who is the money guy, I think. Because I think it was like 2 or 3 years ago now. I think it was at some point during Valiant's run. Like I think Dinesh Shamdasani put together he might have been the one who bought the Valiant intellectual property.
Yeah, that sounds right. An Indian guy bought Valiant, and they tried to restart the company for a little while.
It's still around.
Yeah, well, but is that the same thing that Lisa's doing, or is that a different?
That's the same thing that Lisa's doing. Yeah. Lisa Hawkins, who used to work at Marvel, is now an editor there too. But what happened was, at some point, they had to raise more capital. I can't even remember. It was like 2008 or something. Valiant came back. I don't even remember when. And like 2014 or 15, they had to raise more capital. So there was a Chinese company who wanted in on the comic book movie stuff. They're the company who put out the Bloodshot movie. So they invested in Valiant, but I think there was some clause where after 2 or 3 years, if some certain things happened or didn't happen, they could buy out Valiant. So now they own Valiant 100%. So the people who originally there left Valiant when they were 100%, when they were owned by the. And so the guy that I know who is listed here as co-CEO and chief creative officer is Warren Simmons, who used to be an editor at Marvel in the early 2000s. And he also was Valiant's first editor-in-chief. So now he called me up to see if I wanted to do some production for this, but it's still up in the air. But they got some good books coming out, because a lot of it is the early Valiant guys. Like Matt Kint is writing some stuff for here. Robert Vendetti is writing some stuff, and Joshua Dysart. And they were three of the original. Well, Matt Kint wasn't. Dysart and Vendetti were two of the original Valiant relaunch writers, who I liked both. I think one of them. I think Dysart wrote Harbinger and all the stuff that came after that. With the same character, all of a sudden I forget the guy's name, the main villain in the Valiant universe, and I really like.
Yeah, no, I know this one. Yeah, you're right. It's not Harbinger, but it's something like that. He's an evil.
He wrote all that stuff, and it was really good. I enjoyed it through like 3 series. I read all that stuff and liked it a lot. Harada, that's the guy's name, Toyo Harada.
Yeah. So you're talking about the relaunch, not the mid '90s relaunch.
No, I'm talking the 2000 or 2010 or whenever it was relaunch. All those guys.
How many Valiant relaunches have there been? Are we up to the 4th iteration of the Valiant?
No. There was
third one, I believe.
There was only one. The 90s one wasn't a relaunch. That was a new comic book company. They licensed some guys. They licensed like
they were sold to a video game company.
Right.
Yeah, that's why I was there. Yeah.
They were the licensed one. There's a difference between Valiant and who was the ones that Magnus Robot Hunter?
Yeah, they had to license. They had to license Magnus and Turok from where the
Valiant
Gold Key.
Gold Key. Okay, so when Valiant launched in the early 90s, that was their first launch. That wasn't a relaunch. But they relaunched a couple of licensed characters is what it was.
Okay.
So now, in the 2008 to 10 era, that was their relaunch. But they don't have the licensed characters anymore. They just have the Valiant-owned characters.
Oh no, Magnus Robot Fighter is possibly the greatest comic book character of all time.
Well, someone else licensed Magnus Robot Fighter. I remember as a kid being so confused by Robot Kung Fu. I was like, what? He's the only one who knows Robot Kung Fu? Teach it to people. And I was like, you just karate chop robots and they'd fall apart. I'm like, what is that?
Yeah. Well, it's because his robot teacher 1A gave him special hand toughening exercises. It was a Russ Manning thing when it started, so it was gloriously well done. And then I honestly think Magnus is just a fantastic character because he wears a miniskirt and he punches robots and they explode. I mean, what a character for our era.
Yeah, that was probably the first time that a lot of kids were introduced to the concept of cross-dressing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Karate Kid is sort of a Magnus Robot Fighter knockoff if you get right down to it. But Magnus is just better. I love Magnus, even though like everything I've ever read about the character has been terrible. Like all the attempts.
Without Magnus, Nexus would not exist.
That's a good point.
Yeah, that's true. Magnus and Space Ghost.
And the Matt Kint book is ENIAC is being drawn by Doug Braithwaite, who is another one of those Valiant guys from the relaunch. As long as I think he drew Exo Man of War in the 2000s, but he's a solid artist. And they've also got Juan Jose Rip, who's been around for a little while now.
Good name.
Doing some. He's doing. It's a 3-issue series with Robert Vendetti. He's doing that one. So and some nice Juan Jose Rip artwork too. Let me.
Oh yeah, I know who Doug Braithwaite is. Yeah, he's been around for a while. He's done a lot of really good stuff.
Yeah, I met him in Ireland. I managed to fly to Ireland once for a comic convention because the assistant manager at a comic shop in Dublin was Portuguese and he worked for the LCS for my LCS. And I went there and I managed to sit down with Braithwaite and Carlos Pacheco, and I interviewed those, but they were still on tapes, and I lost those tapes, so I never transcribed them.
Yeah,
lost tapes.
I have that problem myself. Yeah, I have a really good interview with Peter
If
David.
you had just had R2D2, you could have saved the plans.
Yeah. Well, you'd have to at this point you would have to find the right media to play the tapes back. You'd have to get an R2D3 or something like that. Yeah, like I don't even remember all the different formats that video used to come on. What is a high C and stuff like that? Like all the various.
Oh, there was several.
Yeah. God help you trying to get any of that stuff off of there again.
And then the name that surprised me most that I saw here is there's another book by Matt Kint that Matt Hollingsworth is coloring. He's a good colorist. Adam Polina is drawing. Do you remember him?
Ooh. I recognize the name, but I don't.
He was an X-Men artist in the mid to late 80s.
I like
X-Force. I remember him from X-Force.
I like the image on the left there with the giant.
Yeah. This stuff doesn't look. I knew him because he used to hang out in the Marvel bullpen, and I always laugh when I think of Adam Polina. Really nice guy, but in the mid 90s was wearing the tightest pants you've ever seen. Long after 80s tight pants went out of style, but he was rocking them. And he was a bit of a fashion plate too at times. Everybody was used to kind of giggle whenever he came, just because it's like he just always had tight pants on. But I think in the late 90s he left comics to work in video games, and I think moved to Japan even to work in video games.
Cool.
But he's back doing a comic, so I thought that was interesting.
Cool.
I haven't seen him do. I know he's popped up in the last couple of years, but I don't know if he's actually done something.
I'm looking at his work, and it's good. I think I remember him. I do remember somebody with ridiculously tight pants and other people making fun of them for that.
That would be him. He was the only one.
I remember this guy quite well. Yeah, actually, I do. I remember this style, this sort of like secondhand Bacalo Buckingham type stuff that was very big in the 90s. I miss the days when people had really complicated frames around their pages.
Then there's this one I think it's about a horror movie gone wrong. It's like some of them these seem all to be miniseries or one shots, but this one has some nice black and white art by Renato Getty. Was it G-U-E? So is that a J sound?
No, it's G-U is to turn into a G sound. So it's pronounced Geddes.
Okay. Renato Geddes and Marguerite Bennett is the writer. But I like this promo artwork they got here. And these little, let's see if I can get some of these little pages up. But it's got some pretty good, promo artwork. I can't make it. But like I said, this was just free at my local comic shop. Then what's this other one? Zeb Wells and David LaFuente. That's a Santa Claus one, Sleigh Bells. That one doesn't interest me as much, but
Is Sleigh Bells spelled S-L-A-Y?
I think so. You got it.
That's how good it is.
Yep.
That was predictable.
Well, if I thought of it, it must be great. So therefore,
another guy that Matt Kint's writing a third book here. Louis LaRosa doing a book called Megalith.
That sounds good. Matt Kint's a hard worker, dude. Ever since his very first, I forget what it was that he broke in on. I have a friend down in Austin who's his biggest fan. But from his very first work, you're right, it's always spies.
Yeah. I liked Mind Management a lot that he did.
Oh, they gave him Ninjak for a while.
Yes. Joshua Dysart is writing for Tomas Giorello.
Pistol Whip, that was what it was called.
In a book called Odin's Eye, which once again, it's coming. It's just who knows when that's coming. I guess they got to get started.
I think Giorello did some Conan stuff for Dark.
Yeah, I know that. And they've even got David Lapham here, maybe, and Tony Millionaire and Brendan McCarthy may be doing stuff for them.
Oh, Tony Millionaire needs to be working. I know he's making bank by doing these pet portraits, but what a waste. What a waste of an amazing talent.
I'm not a fan of the name Bad Idea, nor this logo or low-res college art project design, but I like some of the comics that are coming out. They look pretty good.
Yeah, I'm superstitious. I don't like stories with negative names. I mean, I'll read them, but you attach yourself to a company with a bad name, and it usually doesn't go well.
You're counting on people understanding that it's supposed to be ironic, and you know what it is? It's the B sharps. Do you remember what was that line? We need a name that sounds clever at first, but gets more annoying as time goes by.
Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah, the B sharps really nailed it.
Yeah. And to me, kind of that's what bad idea is. I'm like, oh man, they could have come up with a better name.
At least they didn't name their company after a gun or a demon. I was over that too. Oh, that happened a lot. Was Oni?
What was that?
Yeah, I remember Oni.
Yeah, there was a bunch of we're such bad. Oni's great. Don't get me wrong. I shouldn't be putting him down, but there's so many companies that have names that just what incredible badasses we are. I think stuff like First Comics is pretty clever, to be honest, but maybe it's a little boring.
Well, maybe not a company, but for a character, Belial Kalashnikov. How's that sound?
Get some issues and it'll be great.
That reminds me of a joke that I'll tell you while we're off the air, but can't handle it all. But
and I got it. So the other comic I bought was National Anthem.
Hold on, let me get you on the solo.
It's a Gerard Way comic. Let's see. The artist Romero, and it's just the sort of thing. I know that Gerard Way is leftover Grant Morrison. I get it, but
I've never been able to get myself to buy a Gerard Way comic.
Yeah, and honestly, it's not super well written, and I'm not 100% on why I bought it, but I enjoyed the hell out of it. I think I showed you this page that I like. It's this goofy comic about sort of a Car Wars future where everybody is like a mod gang and they're fighting in their cars. But there's this one double page spread where you just go through like all the different gangs and their different cars. And I am a complete sucker for stuff like this. I'm in my 40s and I was sitting there studying it and looking at all like, oh, that's what that guy's got in his pockets. Oh, yeah.
You like source book type material?
Yeah, I love stuff like that. I have schematic.
Same boat, and I think it comes from being a role playing game guy.
Yeah, well, there's only a few things that comics can do that nobody else can do, but schematics is one of them. If you want to just take something apart and look at it from every conceivable angle.
At the end of Rain Like Hammers, they give us this random shot of a spaceship, and then this random shot of all these characters. So they weren't in the book. I mean, I guess they
just like there. Yeah.
I mean, I want more than that. That's not the whole meal. I like a 4-course meal when I'm reading a comic, but that's a full star right there. I'll sit there especially if I like the comic, I'll sit there and I'll pick out the characters and think about it. I love like the Marvel Universe exploded diagrams, stuff like that. The map.
Well, I'd say this was a 4-course meal. This comic, it's big. There's lots of eating going on, and
I do agree with you on that font on the front there. The backwards E's look like letter G's.
That may have been why I didn't put this on my pull list because, it's on my pull list now. But what happens is, every week I get an email from my comic shop, final order cutoff.
Right.
A list of a whole bunch of comics, Marvel, DC, Image.
Yeah.
And if I want that comic, I click on the link and it shows me a picture of the cover, gives me a little description. If I want to add it to my pull list, I add it to my pull list.
Right.
It's great. Every comic shop should have this. But the guy who owns my comic shop, his real job is he's a coder for one of these big banks or something. So he wrote all the code himself to do this. I'm like, man, you should sell this to other comic shops because it's a great thing.
Right.
But I'm pretty sure when I clicked on this link and saw this logo, I was like, freaking hate logos I can't read. And it was a $5 first issue, which I'm kind of against. But this big, heavy $5. It's like one of the reasons I haven't bought any Aftershock comics in a year is because they make all $5 first issues now, and they're no bigger than their $4 second issues.
Oh God!
And I'm just like, what?
How much can the industry take? That is just
yeah.
I want some value to my. I mean, that's why I love deconstructed comics or slow speed comics when I'm reading them from the library. But when you're paying $3 or $4 or $5 at the store,
yeah,
and you just get 24 pages of like thoughtful pauses in between sentences. You're just like, I want different things when I buy a comic. That I know that's one of the things that makes it a tough industry. Is like I have different expectations when I put down $5 of hard earned.
Right. As opposed to borrowing it from the library. If you borrow, there's no investment if you borrow it from the library.
Yeah. I'm just when I borrow from the library, I'm just like entertain me. Like when I
put it down. I borrowed before COVID the latest X crossover, House of X, Powers of X.
Yeah.
I made it 2 or 3 issues into it and just said, forget this. I returned it to the library. No skin off my nose.
Yeah.
If I had bought that, I would have been like, ooh.
I feel like the superhero, one of the things that comics used to do so well, superheroes, I feel like the need for that has been lifted off of us technologically. Where, like WandaVision, stuff like, I haven't seen WandaVision yet, but from what I can tell, it's every bit as complicated and weird as any given Avengers comic. Like, they've made... Sorry.
I think one of the problems with Marvel and DC Comics now, one of the problems they face is that fans can now get their superhero fix from movies and TV. And that's a lot easier than reading a comic.
Yeah, and in some ways better. I mean, one of the reasons comics came, like the Hulk was bright green because they didn't have much printing technology.
Right.
They could make somebody who was big. You could make a big green blob or a big red blob or a big red and blue blob. Mm-hmm. And that's how they got through, was these very simple techniques. And now we're past that, where you can actually see the Hulk punch an entire spaceship in real time. You don't have to use your imagination at all anymore. And, I guess that's, when I put it that way, it sounded sad, but I actually think it's a good thing because it frees up comics to do like weird stuff like what Matt Kent does. Because you read Matt Kent comics, they're weird as hell.
If only more people would read them. That's why I do my best to shame my friends into buying comics.
I don't think they put enough effort into converting viewers into readers.
I don't think you can. I think that's a fool's errand.
It may be.
I think that I think that some viewers are going to be readers, but I don't think you can make them. I don't know that there's no way I can think of to make viewers into readers, because one of the problems is reading is effort and viewing isn't, and people don't want effort. The vast majority of people don't want effort.
Yeah, it's not going to be the mindless entertainment people. I think the main people who are reading comics these days are, there's 2 major classes. One are people who like really weird shit, and the other are people who are professionals in some way. Like they're either comic artists themselves or they're filmmakers and they're looking for properties to adapt. And so I think that one of the things comics do well is things like King City, which is just berserk off the wall. Nobody could make a movie out of this because it's just so strange. Like, what on earth is going on? And also, like, I feel like comics are good for picking out really weird, specific points of pop culture and filling these tiny little niches that are left over without having to spend all the money. Like, we were working on a comic called Total Recall, which was what if Total Recall was still going on? And I mean, the project stalled, but if we had gotten that done and I had taken that to comic book shows, people would have bought it right and left, because you would have been like, hey, you want to see more Total Recall with Arnold Schwarzenegger still young? Obviously. Everybody wants that.
Have you seen, I don't know who's doing it. I see it on Twitter. There's a guy making Magnum PI comics.
Yeah.
Little sort of Magnum PI mini comics of some. I don't know if they're officially licensed.
I think they have. You had a license. Interesting.
That's fantastic. Yeah. I mean, well, but it's one of those forgiveness instead of permission things. Like, what you'd want to do is, if you had an idea for a great Magnum PI comic book, just do it, and then they'll pick it up and pay you to do it eventually, because you're doing a great job, theoretically.
Or they won't notice you.
Yeah, or that
notices comic book artists.
I tried so hard to get Busta Rhymes to read this comic book about him and H.P. Lovecraft. Oh, wow, the Magnum PI comic's awesome.
Yeah, you found it?
Yeah, it's actually really good.
I wanted to order it, but I haven't because it's over in England, I think. So it costs a lot to mail it here.
Wow, it's like sort of Tothian. Like, who's doing this has some chops, and it looks.
The guy knows what he's doing, definitely.
Yeah, and he's good at drawing a likeness.
Yeah, if it wasn't in England and was a cheap postage here, I would have bought it already, but I didn't.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to buy it because I'm not steeped in the lore of Magnum PI as perhaps I should be. But yeah, I got to admit I'm intrigued and it's well drawn. It's definitely drawn in a sort of European style.
Yeah. Good stuff. Like I said, I don't know. It just popped up in my Twitter one day. I don't know how I ended up following the guy or whatever, because I don't follow a lot of comic book artists and stuff like that. So sometimes I just follow random weirdo artists out there.
Mark Johnson is his name. Yeah, so I mean, I think that's something that comics can do well. Like you couldn't, statistically speaking, you couldn't do a Magnum PI comic, or I'm more likely to do Columbo, for example. Like you really could not do a Columbo TV show, even if you gave me $10 million. It's just not going to happen. But I can do a good Columbo comic for very little money, and then people could enjoy reading Columbo. It's
Clyde fans. I don't think you can do except as a comic. I don't know if you've ever read that one. Seth, the one named cartoonist, Palookaville.
Right.
Because it's all about nostalgia, and it's all about a guy looking back on his life, running a fan company in Canada in the 50s and 60s and 70s. It is one of my all-time favorite comics, but I can't imagine making a movie or TV show out of it. I don't even know how you do that.
Yeah.
Can't have a guy standing there being
itself to being a decent TV show adaptation.
What was that?
Berlin by Jason Lutz.
That could, because that's all about the interaction of people. I could see them doing Berlin as a TV show.
Yeah. Berlin is an example of a comic that's a dry run for a movie. Like it's not something that could never ever be done. It's designed to be very doable, and just he hasn't had the money to do it yet. I'm actually surprised nobody's made a movie of Berlin yet.
I don't think there'd be a ton of interest in that, but there could be. I mean, it's almost like have you seen the movie? What's the name of it? Swing Kids?
No, but I'm familiar with it.
It's a good movie if you ever get a chance to watch it, but it's sad as hell. Because if you watch the trailer for it, the trailer is like the Swing Kids versus the Nazis. Ooh, you lousy Swing Kids!
Yeah.
but the movie itself, besides having great soundtrack and dance numbers, is the Nazis crushing the Swing Kids under their heel.
That's what
you didn't. Yeah, because that's what really happened. You didn't, when you were a swing kid and Nazi Germany was starting up, you didn't, get to win.
Actually, if you'd like to make it even worse, they did win in one town. They won the town of Münster, and they actually kicked the Nazis out of Münster. And the Nazis actually had to occupy and invade Münster several times during World War II. And you know how it all ended? Americans don't speak German, so they didn't know that. So they just saw a city on a map, so they bombed it 98% flat anyway. They had no idea that they were bombing the one city that was fighting the Nazis. Whoops. But
I'd read a book, I can't remember the name of it, a couple years ago, about the one time the Americans and the Germans fought on the same side.
Oh, against Dracula.
Just was going to mention Billy Tucci. I was talking to him at HeroesCon a few years ago, and he had a story pitch he wanted to do about that scenario. The German regulars, I think the SS was completely out of the question, but the German regulars and the Americans cooperated to get some scientists out of some city somewhere.
It was
the history behind the story is like, this sounds really good. Why is no public? I'd love to buy that.
Yeah, it was one of the.
We'll touch it.
I read a nonfiction book on it. It was one of the last battles of World War II, and there were a bunch of Allied scientists being held in this castle, basically.
Yeah, That's the story. Yeah.
And they were guarded by German regular army.
Mm-hmm.
And the Americans were on their way, but the SS was coming to kill everyone first.
Right.
And the German regular army, the leaders didn't want to kill everyone. They're like, if we kill everyone, the Americans are going to kill us. We're not fanatics. So it was like the Americans in the castle and the German regular army had to sort of team up to try to link up with the American army to defend against the SS. They had to let the SS know. I mean, they had to let the American army know to kill the SS and not the guys in the castle.
Right. It was the battle for Castle Itter, and it happened in Austria. It's amazing how Google, you can just type word salad in it, it'll tell you.
Yeah.
It happened in May 1945, May 3rd, May 5th.
Telling me this story at the convention, it sounds like really good. I'd like, if he kickstarted that, I'd do it right now. I was like, but just none of the major publishers will touch it.
No, well, they want the next Wolverine. You can't blame them, but
yeah, sure. When vaudeville comes back.
If you're a history buff, there are so many different, quirky, interesting little things that happened in World War II that you could spend the rest of your life just on that.
Yeah.
No.
Is that
speaking of history buffs?
Civil War?
It's time for a Civil War comic from Image.
Yeah.
Image will put out a Civil War comic. No one else will.
I don't want to overlook the but I tried really hard to do a Civil War comic for a while, and I'm actually emotionally in the process of giving up right now. And a lot of it comes from Tarantino and Inglourious Bastards and Django Unchained, because you watch Inglourious Bastards, and he makes it very clear that the Germans are perfectly nice people. They're brave, they're loyal, they won't give up their friends, they play drinking games, they're going to have a kid, they like beer, they're great people. But the Nazi high command are just demonic devils who need to be burned down in a movie theater. And then you get to Django Unchained, and he's just like, but these people were all bad. Like, they all have the women, the children, everybody. Quentin Tarantino himself is a slaver. It has to get blown up because that's how bad it all was. And I love that idea, and I really wanted to do a Civil War comic. And I worked on it for something like 10 years, and I think I'm just giving up because there's just it's too depressing. It's like, it's more depressing than World War II. It's more depressing than the Holocaust. You can't make a good story out of it because it's just upsetting in every direction.
Where actually the town I live in is where Virginia Tech is located, and Bud Robertson, who died about a year or so ago, was actually the world's leading expert on the Civil War.
Yeah.
Most people do not realize that 90% of the Civil War was fought in the state of Virginia.
Yep, sure was. Yep, it was.
I live in Civil War Central.
Yeah, that and World War I is what taught me you don't want to be the home team for a war.
No, you definitely don't. That's why Americans are so fortunate.
Yeah, for real. Tim, Rob, I'm your Tim now.
Tim had a death in the family this week.
Oh,
his new father-in-law passed on.
Yeah.
I think from what I can tell from his post, he's been sick for a little while, so it was expected, but it's still not any fun.
No,
his wife lost her father, so.
What he said about his father-in-law was actually really touching. I read that.
Yeah.
I hadn't put two and
he
two
posted something on Facebook about it, so.
Yeah.
But meanwhile, back at Two Moons, the horror book, John Arcudi is writing it, joined by artist Valerio Giordano. It's like Dick Giordano with a Gian in front of it, Gian in front of it, to chronicle the war experiences of a young Pawnee man named Virgil Morris, a.k.a. Two Moons, as he joins the Union side during the Civil War. When he is suddenly confronted with his shamanic roots, he discovers horrors far worse than combat as the ghosts of his past reveal the monstrous evil all around him. So it's a horror book.
Yeah. Well, if you were Native American, the Union really was not on your side. They really weren't. That's
nobody was on your side, including the other Indian tribes.
Yeah, that's part of the problem. Is they really
don't realize how much internal strife there was between various tribes.
it definitely proves that people will not unite even in the face of annihilation.
It was interesting too. The one thing, the most important war in Native American history, I never realized this before a few years ago when I read about it, was the War of 1812.
Sort of, yeah.
Andrew Jackson, SOB, man.
Well, because they always say, there's always discussion. There's always discussion on who won the War of 1812, but there's no discussion on who lost it. The American Indians, because as part of the settlement for the War of 1812, the British were no longer allowed to ally themselves with the Indian tribes.
Yep.
So the Indian tribes before the War of 1812, the Indian tribes had political power through the British and getting guns from the British.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
After the War of 1812, they lost all their political power. So they were the American and England winners and losers. We kind of just it didn't even matter between the two of us who we slotted right back in to their trade empire. It was kind of like that the War of 1812 was about us not getting our due as part of the British trade empire. And then we went to war and it was kind of a stalemate, and then we slotted right back into their trade empire and things went on as normal. Except the Indians really were the losers of the war because all their political power. From then on in, they were pawns, mostly.
The slave South came from. The South was Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi was very much the territory of the civilized tribes. And the reason they were called civilized is because they held slaves. Right. They were every bit as civilized as everybody else. But after the War of 1812, they marched down there and took all that territory. And that's where the slave South started. So if you think about it, like from 1814, when they took all that territory, to 1864, when they lost it, the slave South only lasted 50 years. Not counting Virginia and South Carolina, obviously, but like the expansionist plantation slavery South was a 50-year period, which is why it terrified everybody. And the whole, it'll go away thing was not... People were not buying that at the time. No. It didn't feel like it was going away. It didn't look like it was going away. It looked like it was expanding at a breakneck pace.
This whole discussion makes me wish there were more historical comics.
Yeah. I find as many of them as I can, that's for sure.
There are a lot of historical comics in France. There's an interesting series about about voyagers, about sea voyagers, and I have one of those books about Magellan, and there's another one about the voyage of the Beagle,
HMS Beagle.
Yeah, and those are the two I know. I think there's a couple more.
Age of Exploration is just so rich with all kinds of different stuff you can do in comics.
And I have 2 books of a series by Manara, which is chronicling the life of the painter Caravaggio.
The Rick Geary stuff is fantastic.
Yeah,
the Treasury of Victorian Murders and all that stuff.
I like Rick Geary just in general, even his non-historical stuff. I just like his art style a whole lot.
Even his Junior Carrot Patrol. Remember that one? The one Flaming Carrot book he did back in the 90s, maybe it was?
Maybe. That was published by Dark Horse, right?
The Junior Carrot Patrol from Dark Horse Comics came out with Rick Geary doing a Junior Flaming Carrot book. That was weird. But Brubaker and Phillips have the second graphic novel coming out in their Reckless series. The first one I read on Hoopla. I'm going to buy it eventually, a physical copy. But that was good, the first one. What was this?
We were supposed to be getting Reckless in Portugal, but now the publisher didn't say anything about it for the 2021 publishing plans.
Ah, it's good. Jack Jackson or Jackson?
Yeah, he bring up a good point. Jack Jackson has got a really good reputation of doing historical comics, but unfortunately they're kind of like published almost like underground comics. They really didn't have mass distribution, so most people never got to see them.
Most of this is is one of these where it's a list of order numbers, so there's not a lot to read. Let me see if they have any True Believers. Haven't been any True Believers comics in a while. Nope, still none.
Right.
Whatever this month is.
Right now, any big keys are probably reprinted. So
I had read something just a few days ago that there's going to be a reprint of the Captain America Centennial Treasury book.
At size?
I don't know. I didn't really dig into that, but I would think if they're going to do it,
I would hope so.
Market it with the Treasury, they would do it at size, but
because DC did more fun at that size, and they did the Superman Muhammad Ali at that size. So right. I got both of those years and years ago.
Gotcha. I love Treasury size books. I wish more companies would do those.
I loved them as a kid. Still love them.
Yeah.
I have to pull mine down and look at them sometime. Last time I looked at them, my friend Ed gave me the Doctor Strange one a couple of years ago, and I did a video on it looking through that one. That was a nice.
When I was a kid, when Star Wars came out, we were stopped at a convenience store, and I saw the Star Wars Treasury size comic. Like, Mom, look at that! And she bought it for me. I haven't been the same since. So.
Were you all talking about Jackson when I was gone?
What was that?
Were you all talking about Jackson when I was gone, or?
Yes. There was a.
He's a friend of a friend.
Reader mentioned him. We were talking about historical comics.
I barely managed to miss him. I knew a lot of people who hung out with him, like Mac White, Sam Hurt, and all those guys.
And Austin.
Yeah. Shannon Wheeler, I guess, and Chris Wares, who you would know from that crew. But he printed the first edition of God's Knows on a mimeograph machine in the Texas Capitol basement. He was apparently a heck of a guy, and I went back and I read his comics, and they were amazing. Boy, his comics were good. Yeah. He might be the definitive historian on a lot of Comanche issues. People don't think about comics as serious history, but that guy was a serious historian.
Right.
Yeah, I don't think I've read a lot of his stuff. I'm gonna have to look it up.
We're really hitting a lot of Austin comics today, aren't we?
Yeah.
This is an odd segue of Austin comics. Are you familiar with the band that was from Austin called The Sword?
The what?
The Sword.
Oh yeah. Actually,
okay. Kyle
Sword used to print my comics for me, and he wouldn't charge me. He's a cool guy. I like that.
The guitar player. They had played in a city. Their singer grew up not very far from where I live. Okay.
Yeah.
So they were playing in Roanoke, Virginia, and that's because that's where JD was from. That's where he grew up. So before the show, I went to my quote-unquote local comic shop. It was about a 30-minute drive from here. And I'm sitting there looking through some stuff, and Kyle Shutt walks in, the guitar player for The Sword. I'm like,
yeah,
Kyle, what the hell are you doing in here? And we had a good conversation for like about 30 minutes or so. But he recommended that if I ever get to Austin, that I need to check out. There's a big comic shop there. I think it's called Austin Comics or Austin Books.
Yeah. It's right up the street.
I saw one of their videos on the internet. It's like, yeah, that's a place I could spend thousands of dollars in very easily.
Yeah, they're mostly a toy store now, but yeah. Oh, yeah. I don't know how much you want to talk about as Sleepy Reader, but yeah, like a lot of Austin. If it's famous in Austin, it's not famous anywhere else. But comics, for some reason, managed to get out a little bit. And there was a crew, a sketch group of people. It was Jackson. It was Mac White hung out with them. It was Chris Ware. It was Martin Thomas, who I try to come on our Tuesday meetings every once in a while. The guy he was a colorist in the 90s at Marvel. He colored all of McFarlane's covers. Okay. Like he did Amazing Spider-Man 300. And just a few other people that you've heard of. And there was just an enormous comic scene.
Wasn't Martin Wagner from Austin?
Yes, actually, I used to do the Hepcats guy, right?
Yeah.
Super cool. I used to do a life drawing class with him. And Andrew Jones.
Years I've been thinking, dude, just finish Hepcats one of these days.
Yeah. Well, he still does life drawing. I mean, he's still an artist, but yeah, he doesn't do comics anymore.
Right.
Andrew Jones, the guy who does the concept art for The Mandalorian, was part of it. Corey Coleman and Martin Thomas again, the double toasted guys. Like, we've all gone our separate ways, but yeah, we used to hang out.
Does that guy go by Android Jones?
Yeah.
Okay. I know who that is.
Yeah, he's the guy that drew a self-portrait of the inside of his mouth. Have you heard this story?
No, but I've seen a lot. Like, he's done a lot of science fiction artwork.
He was doing a self-portrait a day for a solid year. And when you do something every day for a year, you start getting weird with it. And at one point, he did a self-portrait where he sat there with his tongue and felt the inside of his teeth and drew the inside of his mouth. It looked like, but as process, it was fascinating. Yeah, Austin was a good time for a while. You know, back when artists could afford to live there, we all lived there. It was really cool. And Jackson was sort of like Jackson and Sam Hurt were sort of the Eminence Greases, or the what's the word? The grand, not the grand. What's the masculine version of Grand Dame? Grand Seigneur, Emeritus, Professors Emeritus. That's the yeah, they were the Professors Emeritus of the whole scene, because I mean Jackson died of old age in like 2004. Like, he'd been around for a long time.
And even still live in Austin, or was everybody priced out?
That was right as we were all getting priced out. That was the process. Okay. Yeah, everybody died or got priced out. Like, do you know who Mac White is?
No.
He worked for Fantagraphics for several years. And going back to 1814, 1812, he did a lot of stuff about Davy Crockett, because Davy Crockett's big breakthrough was the War of 1812. That's where he got famous. But yeah, it was a good time. It was cool when Austin had a thriving comics scene. I feel like if you wanted to find a thriving scene in America now, probably Minneapolis and St. Paul would be the best place to look. Not Austin anymore, sadly.
Mm-hmm. The mini apple. I just watched a movie where they called that the mini apple. Yeah. Except nobody called that anymore.
It's where Xander Cannon lives, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yep. Sure does. His house got hit by a tornado during SpringCon in 2011 or something like that. We actually we all got closed in the building, and his house was hit by a tornado while we were on the sales floor.
Not good.
Oh well. I mean, we wanted interesting lives. We get interesting lives. What do you want?
Let's say they're priced out of Portland too.
Yeah, you still got Shannon up there, and I think Farrell's there too. But yeah, most everybody had been in Portland a long time ago. I mean, that's why, you know, I don't think I'm representative of indie artists at all. But I don't think there really are a lot of indie artists anymore, and mostly everybody's retreated to their hometown. Like Danielle Corsetto lives in West Virginia now.
She's I read her strip. What's the name of that?
Girls with Slingshots.
Yeah, there we go. Read that. I remember that. I liked it. It was really fun.
Yeah. Danielle.
She's in repeats now, but it's still one of my daily web comics on my RSS feed. So
yeah. One thing that I remember, that she had the page with the character bios. She made it like in the first strips, and there are characters there who never show up beyond the 10th strip. But you're looking at 500, and still those characters that nobody cares about, and the new ones that appear there, like Cactus.
Yeah, maybe she should go back and work on that. I mean, Girls with Slingshot has been going on she'd been doing it for a while when I met her in 2004. So, well, there
hasn't been new ones in years.
Yeah, but Brandon still lives up there. Yeah, I mean, it's hard. Dark Horse is still in Portland. So anybody who's working for Dark Horse, I think, right? Aren't they still in Portland?
I think so. Didn't Image move up there?
Got me.
I think Image moved up. They moved out of San Francisco up to there.
I would assume everybody moved out of San Francisco.
Yeah. I think they did.
Like Image is being run out of Jim Valentino's car in the back in the parking lot in Mountain View. Yeah.
Well, Richmond is about 4 hours east of me.
Image is in Portland.
I know there are a lot of comic shops in Richmond. But as far as there's two guys I can think of. It's the two guys that do Atomic Robo. Scott Wagner and he's the artist. What's the guy that writes it? Brian Clevenger.
Are you talking about Red 7? Yeah. Those guys are great. I really like those guys.
No, Richmond's about a 4-hour drive for me.
Yeah. I love Atomic Robo. That was hilarious.
So there's a lot of
Atomic Robo, but I love that book. It was like one of my favorite books for a long time, but I just got so far behind on it.
Yeah. So you're up in the hills, right, Scott?
I'm sorry?
You're up in the hills in Virginia?
I am in the southwestern part of Virginia, where Virginia Tech is located in Blacksburg.
Yeah, okay. You just,
So
yeah.
I'm about 4 hours south of Washington, D.C., and about 3.5 hours west of, it's about 3.5 for Richmond, okay, depending on traffic, and about 2.5 hours north of Charlotte, North Carolina.
Nice place to be. Probably have a nice view from your house.
There's a lot of comic book artists up here in the Hudson Valley, but they're all old.
Yeah. Well, we're all old. I mean, comics is really a medium for the old. I hate to say it, but it really is.
Well, now it didn't used to be. In the 90s, it wasn't. We just all got old.
It was being produced by the old. It was just being consumed by the young. Now it's both produced and consumed by the old.
There are so many schools teaching how to make comics these days. There are probably more students learning how to make comics than there are comic fans. Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. I
wouldn't doubt it. I
get ads for them all the time.
It's like those poetry magazines where you like literally everybody that reads the poetry magazine is a poet who wants to put a poem in the magazine.
Yeah.
That's not a good
Everybody who reads Batman wants to draw Batman.
Yeah, exactly.
We're at those sales numbers now.
Yeah. I mean, that is the lowest an industry can go. Once you're down to only, like, you go to comic book conventions, there's nobody at comic book conventions except for people that make comics anymore and people that like costumes.
No, there's still plenty of people who buy variant cover. I would say that on YouTube, there's probably, just by watching YouTube, there's probably more collectors now who buy their comics for their covers than buy their comics to read them.
Yeah. Do you remember what happened with Absolute Identity Crisis?
No, which one was that?
Identity Crisis was a big DC grim and gritty crossover a few years ago. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's how art school works.
Yeah. You never have to go home. No, but Identity Crisis was the grim and gritty where Sue Dibney, like Ralph Dibney's wife, was murdered, and they made a huge deal out of it. And Brad Metzler wrote it, I want to say. And so they did a huge edition, Absolute Identity Crisis, and they published it and they put it out. And after about a year, somebody finally, after a year and selling thousands of copies, somebody finally read the damn thing. And it turns out that a bunch of pages in the middle were just completely backwards. And it wasn't, it was an editing error. It wasn't a printing error. It was in the source files and just nobody ever checked it. And they sold thousands of copies and nobody ever actually read it. Everybody just wanted to have a copy of Identity Crisis on their wall.
I can believe that.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, one of the topics I have listed, I was writing down stuff. And sometimes I just come up with ideas in the middle of the week. And one of them was something I'm sure all of us have. Series you want to reread but haven't found the time or energy to. Everybody who bought Identity
orders my collection.
Yeah, exactly. That's like, there's so much stuff I'd love to reread, but just especially lately, like at the beginning of COVID, I was rereading a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
But the last month or two, I just kind of lost the energy.
I don't know. I would read all of Prophet if I had time. I'd read that all again just to put it together. I'm going to reread Kaiju Max when it's over or at some convenient point.
It's like I've been rereading all of Invincible. There's 12 books, and I stopped at 10 and haven't made it to 11 in a month or two. And I went through like 1 through 9 in like 2 months.
Yeah.
Would you read all of Walking Dead?
I kind of want to. Here, I would be reading all of Walking Dead again right now if it wasn't $4 an issue. Because they're doing the Walking Dead reprints, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
In color. I'd actually be buying that if it were 1 issue a month for $3 an issue. But instead, it's 2 issues a month for $4 an issue. I do not want to spend $8 a month on the Walking Dead reprint. I'd rather get the collected editions and reread it in that, or reread it digitally. And someday I will, just not today. But because I've read all of Walking Dead as it came out, but I've never reread any of it.
Yeah, I can tell it's an interesting series.
Oh, it was fun. It was a good time. That was one where was Jacob Chabot at Marvel when you were there?
No.
Okay, he must have come after you. He has what is probably the most read copies of Walking Dead ever. Because when Walking Dead came out, was it 2005, 2003? He was the one at Marvel who had the first 2 issues over at his desk. And he was like, oh, this is good. You have to read this. So it's like everybody at Marvel read Jacob Chabot's 2 issues of The Walking Dead. And I started buying it with issue 3. And at that time, The Walking Dead #1 was about $20. And I'm like, I'm not spending $20 on a comic that's 2 months old. I'll just get the collected edition when it comes out, whatever.
And now it's like 400. But yeah, you can just get it.
It's thousands.
Wow.
Yeah.
I believe it.
Yeah. But he has more people read those first 2 issues of The Walking Dead, Jacob Chabot's issues, than probably any other issues of The Walking Dead. Because at least 20 people read Jacob's Walking Dead 1 and 2.
Yeah.
I mean, while we're on this, and while I'm name dropping like mad, Robert Kirkman is actually from here, and The Walking Dead starts in
Kentucky?
Cynthiana.
Kentucky, you mean?
Lexington. Walking Dead starts in Cynthiana, which is that way. No, that way. Anyway, it's about 20 miles that way. And Robert Kirkman and I used to work at the same bookstore, but not at the same time. And there was a third guy who did, I want to say, Biker Mice from Mars or something.
Oh, I remember that one.
Also worked there. Yeah, that was the closest Lexington ever had to a comic scene. But he's long gone. But yeah, he's from right around here.
Yeah. By the way, Jeff has a Kickstarter going right now.
I do.
The War on Christmas.
It's going well.
Put the link in the comments. It's going well. A stripper and an elephant take on the patriarchy, the man, whoever they think that is, and because they can't throw a hand grenade at him.
Yeah. They take on the city of Austin. They do a really good job of critiquing the city of Austin. Promethea is a hard one to get through.
Promethea, you had to read month by month.
Really?
A little bit at a time, you're okay. It was interesting that way. But all at once, because there's so much Kabbalah explaining going on.
That's what I really want to read, but I never have gotten around to reading it.
It started out as a Wonder Woman riff.
Mm-hmm.
And the first probably 2 volumes of it, maybe 12 issues, are a Wonder Woman riff. And then it becomes Alan Moore's take on the Kabbalah and Jewish mysticism. There's Promethea walking you through the history and what's going on with Jewish mysticism.
Literally walking, just walking and talking. And for Kate, just walking and walking.
Issues after issues of walking and talking.
Yeah, and
explaining to you how the world works.
You got to say it like Seinfeld. What's going on with Jewish mysticism?
Yeah. I just remember, literally, without exaggeration, throwing the comic down and going, if you want to write the little booklet at the back of a pack of tarot cards, just write it. You don't need one.
I have done that, and it will be one of the PDFs I release soon. Except it's not tarot cards; it's my own cards. It's what did I name them? The Envoy Oracle deck. It's
cool.
I created a whole set of cards, an instruction book in what the meanings all are. I did this about 10 years ago, and I've been trying to work it into a story since then, which I'm just about to do. But I did the instruction book in 2006, 2007, and it just sat there. And I just redesigned it this year to make it look better and look good as a digital file. So I'll be releasing that on jaredosborne.com as one of my links that you can find probably next week or the week after, because I just stumbled onto it again and went, oh, I have to release it. And someone requested it on one of my videos too, because I'd mentioned it before. But yeah, I put a whole set of instructions, how to lay them out. Now I actually have a, where is it? Somewhere in here.
We're gonna have to race him and Tim one of these days. Just mention something obscure and see who gets to it first.
Yeah, there they are. I made my own set years ago, so I have my own set of the cards. Here, but I actually want to get them manufactured someday. 48 cards, and they're not. They all have concepts on them, like one card is the fish in the night.
Huh.
One card is the future parking lot.
Oh God.
One card is dog bites man. So there's all sorts of different deep blue sea. And these cards all have meanings that I've written in the instruction book. The divine couple. And they're broken into, where is it? They're broken into two categories. They're called the hidden and the revealed. And the hidden, like the hidden ones, like this one is just solid, is the name of the card. The pictures aren't literal.
Mm-hmm.
They're like the trickster is one of these cards. So the pictures aren't literal on the hidden, but on the revealed, where is it? The art of deception. They're literal. Like, see, there's a playing card in her pocket. Sky Miles is literal. It's guys flying in the sky. So it's like a personal billboard, a T-shirt.
That's fantastic.
So
I can see your analytical approach to life lending itself to something like that.
Yeah. So each card has like, where's one of my favorites? There's one in here. That's one of my. It's called the Sky Blue Tie. Where's the sky blue? There we go. The Sky Blue Tie. And this card is all about the limits of what is allowed. Because when you're in a society where you have to wear a tie, this is your only form of personal expression, is what you can get on your tie. So it's the limit of what is allowed within the constraints of the society you're in. So when that one comes up, it means certain things.
If I had a time machine, I would like to find whoever invented the concept of the necktie and go back and have a very long talk with that person.
Yeah, really.
What the hell, man? Come on.
You're going to make a lot of guys very unhappy. What about string ties? What about bolo? String ties never caught on, but they were more comfortable.
But when you work in corporate America, that's the limit of your expression.
Yep. Yeah, you're very right. You're very right.
That's who requested the tarot deck from me. 62 Lefty Blues. All right. Well, I'm going to be posting that soon. I just found the PDF I made of it, so I have to get that. I'll be putting that in a link on jaredosborne.com, and I'll let you know when it's up there.
Cool.
Yeah, I set up a Dropbox just so I can give links to people.
You should become the great Jaredo and do readings.
Yeah.
You got future parking lot. What does this mean for you?
Somewhere here. Let me see if I got my little. I printed out an instruction book once too.
Future parking lot is just a wonderfully depressing card.
But I actually made the little booklet years ago, and there's also a way you're supposed to lay the cards down too, and what each one means. Mm-hmm. So there's a layout you put the cards in to reveal different things. That's all in there too. I'll have to make sure that's in the instruction book. I don't remember if I put it in the. I have it on my iPad, but didn't release it yet. Scout. That's one of the books I want to reread. Tim Truman's Scout.
Yeah, you were talking about that the other day. That sort of sounded interesting.
He's doing some new Scout material too.
Yeah, that'll be cool.
I want to reread something new. Does that make sense?
No, you want to reread something new?
Not unless you're reading Deja Vu.
Yeah, I got to read it and then reread it. I'd like to reread Black Sad. I'd like to read all of Black Sad at the same time. That would be a good one.
I don't think I've read Black Sad.
It's good. It's actually, they ripped off part of it for True Detective.
I
want to
reread.
Go ahead.
I want to reread volume 2 of Uber because I reread the first volume last year, but I haven't read Uber Invasion, which I haven't finished. I think there's still one story arc left, but there hasn't been a new issue in a year or so.
Oh, I want to reread Invisibles. I want to see how Invisibles is aged.
Tim has gotten me to want to reread Mr. X now too, because he's been talking because he finally got Mr. X.
That's Modern Lark, right? I bet you that's a beautiful comic.
That's what? Modern
and Michael Lark, wasn't that who did Mr. X back in the day?
No, Michael Lark didn't do Mr. X. That was the Hernandez brothers did the first few issues. Seth did a bunch of issues.
Really?
Yeah. Then I can't remember who did it after. If they did it in volume 2, which I wasn't aware of. I know because they put out like I forget what the name of the series was in the 90s. They put out with a bunch of people who I didn't really recognize.
Michael Lark was one of them. That's where I knew it from because that's the first time I was really aware of his work. Was when Michael Lark. He worked on Mr.
Michael Lark. He must have done that second volume in the 90s then, right?
I think so. Or now I'm thinking that maybe I'm wrong because I just Googled it and it came up and then I lost it. But I could have sworn that was the first place I ran into him. It was before Terminal City.
Yeah, that was the 90s stuff. I don't.
Yeah, what it was? Mr. X, the Brides of Mr. X. That was one of his.
Okay, that was the stuff I wasn't too fond of because Dean Motter had nothing to do with it, I think.
Yeah. Hey, that reminds me. Has anybody ever read all of Grendel? Does that make any sense?
Yes, I've read all of Grendel, just about. Well, it depends on which part of Grendel you're talking about.
Yeah, that was the problem because I kept reading. It's like these are happening in different storylines and have no apparent relationship to each other. And this guy's a good artist.
You want me to go through Grendel with you?
Sort of. Yeah.
The original Grendel is Hunter Rose, Devil by the Deed. Excellent. That's the stuff that appeared in the back of Mage.
Mm-hmm.
And since then, the latest stuff he has done has been Grendel, Hunter. Stuff he did in the 2010s, Matt Wagner, was all Grendel, Hunter Rose. Good stuff. But how he originally wrote Grendel was it was a graphic novel. Grendel was Hunter Rose, and he was the villain of the piece. And he died in the graphic novel. He died at the end of the graphic novel. Then they launched the series. And Christine Spar, his niece, became Grendel. First 12 issues of the comic book from the 80s. Good stuff. The Pander brothers drew it, and Matt Wagner wrote it. And then after those first 12 issues, there was some stuff by Matt Wagner that was good, that involved a little Hunter Rose stuff in there. And then there was stuff by, his name just flew out of my, Bernie Moreau.
Bernie Moreau?
Bernie Moreau. I was just remembering how to pronounce his last name because I pronounced it wrong. Bernie, it rhymes with zero. Bernie Moreau.
Okay.
I always called him Bernie Mirault. But it's Bernie Miro. That's the first place I saw him, and I've loved his stuff ever since. But that took place after the Christine Spar stuff, where her assistant sort of became obsessed with Grendel. Then there were some real experimental Matt Wagner issues that were not very good. And then Grendel became a meme. He became this idea that infected people.
Yeah, that's when I got confused. I remember that.
And a lot of that stuff took place in the future.
Yeah.
With all different eras and all different stuff. And if I go to my shelf, I've got 30 issues of it on my shelf, and I don't remember any of it.
Yeah, he becomes a bioweapon at some point, right?
Yeah. And now, actually, the latest story he did, I forgot about this. The latest story he's doing, and I don't think it's picked up much since COVID, is a Grendel Prime story. And Grendel Prime is the final incarnation of Grendel, who's like this immortal robot. And this story is about him searching other worlds for a suitable place for his people to inhabit.
This is all sounding like the later novels in the Dune series.
Yeah, but if you read the Hunter Rose stuff, Grendel, one of the latest things he did was Grendel Shadow, and it was real good. But if you can get your hands on Grendel Devil by the Deed, the very first Grendel story, it's really good. And if you can get the original printing of it, that's the best color in it.
Good to know. All right. Well, yeah, I would like to read Grendel then. I'd like to sit down and read it all one of these days.
Yeah. It's a short graphic novel too, because it was only backup stories.
I like Matt Wagner's work a lot, but I've never read any of the Grendel stuff.
Oh, that's good. And another one of the themes of Grendel, especially with Hunter Rose, is Hunter Rose was Grendel was a crime boss, and Hunter Rose was his secret identity. And Hunter Rose was like a beloved author. So, and it was this weird twisted thing where, this beloved author was really the crime boss, and Grendel's arch enemy was this half wolf called Argent. And he was the hero, but everybody hated Argent because he looked ugly. He smelled, and he was really the hero, right? But he didn't get ever treated like a hero because of the way he looked. Meanwhile, handsome, dashing Hunter Rose, who was the villain of the piece, was secretly Grendel, was beloved because he was this dashing playboy man about town.
And this is when the Batman Grendel comic happened.
That happened 15 years later.
Oh, but that's Hunter Rose was.
That's Hunter Rose. That's Hunter Rose. Yes.
Yeah, Hunter Rose is some
beloved author. Pretty good too, because that's Hunter Rose.
It was cool.
The first Batman Grendel is 1890, and it's with Hunter Rose. Although by that time the ongoing was already well into the future.
Yeah.
And the second Batman Grendel was in the mid 90s. It was published by Dark Horse. And it already features the robot.
Yeah, and he fights the Riddler, if memory serves. The Riddler shows up. But yeah, that was a good comic. I read it, but it was hard. It was impenetrable. Like
what it is with you're well off with any of the Hunter Rose Grendel. You're well off with the Christine Spar Grendel. Everything else, you're taking your chances.
Well, give it a shot. I mean, especially if it comes around in the library.
Yeah.
That's a guarantee. I'll absolutely read it. But yeah, I love things that are overly complicated. But man, this sounds like an investment of time.
The Hunter Rose Grendel is simple. The Christine Spar Grendel is only 12 issues, so it's simple. The Grendel becomes a corrupted meme and becomes Satan in the concept of people is not simple.
Yeah. It's like, what the Cloud Atlas am I reading here?
Basically, it's issues. Okay, it kind of starts in issue 20. In 2023, you don't really know what's going on because there are no main characters. But the two storylines that have art by Tim Sale, 24 to 33 and 34 to 40. Those are pretty good. That's a science fiction political thriller where society has kind of crumbled, but not really. They have technology and they have a political system, but it's not a modern society by our standard.
I must have liked them because I was still buying them then, but I don't remember them at all. And I just reread like the first 20 issues of Grendel at the beginning of last year. Mm-hmm. And then just kind of was like, all right, I don't know if I want to continue. So I haven't yet.
I think Matt Wagner is, at least what I've read, he's a better visual storyteller than he is a science fiction writer.
Yeah. Like Mage is really good, but it's mostly visual storytelling. It's really good.
Yeah, I felt like he was one of the first people to really pick up on what Scott McCloud was laying down. Like, everything that he draws is so clear; you can always tell what's going on, and it's very enjoyable to read just for like seeing what's going on the page. But when you try to figure out the larger story, like you just explained, God damn, you got to diagram it.
I can't even tell you.
Dark Right by Brian Talbot.
Yeah,
it's good stuff, but it's hard to keep track of.
Yeah, I never really made it that far with Brian. You know, it looks amazing, but also there's just a lot of reading.
That's true.
A lot of little words. I hate to say it, but these old eyes are getting tired, and I like the stories that I can read.
Are you not wearing your reading glasses?
They're over here. I'll wear them.
I'm just saying, if he wore reading glasses, he can read, but he was being vain about it.
I gotta look sexy for my comic book friends. What do you want from me?
I got my reading glasses on my head. I'm never without them.
I'm wearing.
I started using them in my mid-40s, and
look at the background. I cleared much. Well, then people put more stuff down, but it was clean yesterday. I swear.
No. Oh, that goes. Talking about rereading things, I want to go back and reread Tom Strong.
Yeah, I have.
I didn't catch on to that until after pretty much it was finished. And then
I was finding that one.
Where the hell was I when this was being published? I wish, I'd picked up.
Funny.
There, but,
I was getting nostalgic today for a comic that's still being published.
Okay.
Lazarus.
I've never read it. But, yeah.
That's Michael Lark, and my goodness, I just forgot who the writer was.
Greg Rucka?
Greg Rucka? Greg Rucka. Well, what happened with Lazarus was I really enjoyed it. It was on my pull list. I bought it all the way through.
Yeah.
Then they stopped it and relaunched it with Volume 2. But they relaunched it as a square-bound $8 quarterly or something like that. And I just don't like that square-bound format in comics. It just bothers me. The comic doesn't open up flat.
I have read this.
So I just never bothered to put the new volume on my pull list. I was like, oh, I'll pick it up and trade someday, which usually for me means I'll never pick it up. But maybe I'll see if it's in the library.
I read Lazarus and it reminded me of I love Keith Giffen, and part of loving Keith Giffen is admitting that he sucks sometimes, and he has this weird future it's sort of developed out of Amethyst, but it's turned into this weird distant future storyline that just is very hard to read and very hard to understand what's going on. And Lazarus reminded me of that. Maybe I didn't give it enough of a reading.
Oh, Lazarus is real good. But Lazarus is the name of sort of the main character class kind of thing. I forget her name. She's got one name, but it takes place in the future, not even that far into the future. But society has kind of broken down, and different parts of the world are now ruled by sort of, I guess you'd call them royal families / corporations. And the Lazaruses are basically their superheroes. And
yep, exactly. And they all have their own houses, and there's wars between the houses. Yes,
right. And
so much.
They don't want to use the superhero. They're war. They don't want to use the superhero. There's the threat of the use of the Lazaruses is as much political as it is military.
Yeah,
and it's a really good book, and the Lazarus source books are insane. And that's another reason I wasn't too thrilled with Volume 2. They used to put out these Lazarus source books, of which I bought a couple of them, but they're impossible to read. They're a 32-page comic with the smallest type possible, all about the world of Lazarus.
Yeah.
And he goes into insane detail in there. I'm like, I'm not enough of a fan to like this stuff.
Yeah.
It's like a business card. I want it to exist, but I also don't want to study it.
Yeah.
I want it to be out there. All I need to do is just be flipping through the computer, be like, yep, you wrote 32 pages. All right, we're good. I'm going to go read your comic book. I can see you worked out your story.
I was okay with spending $4 on it to put it in my Lazarus collection. I was okay with flipping through it and looking at it and maybe reading a paragraph here or two, but I wasn't going to read it cover to cover.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I just wanted to exist.
Yeah. But part of the new square-bound format was going to have X amount of pages of Lazarus, X amount of pages of source book. And I was just like, and it was really the square-bound thing that scared me off. Like this Rainmakers is saddle stitched. It's got staples in the side.
Right.
It opens flat. It's a 60-page comic. That's okay with me. That's what I want. I'm all right with that. The square-bound ones annoy me a little, so I usually don't buy them.
Yeah, there's something to be said for format. Like, square-bound books feel like weird art books to me. They don't feel readable in some.
And there's some of it like this. Dark Horse books have been the crappiest. The physical books lately. I mean, this thing is just too light. It's light as a feather, kind of.
Is that one of the ones where the cover stock is the same as?
Yeah, it's not only self-covered. It's like being thinner than thin, kind of thing. Kind of like like I think Rainmakers is self-covered, but it doesn't matter. It's 60 pages. I mean let's see, is that the same cover stock? Yeah, that's same stock on the cover as inside. But when it's 60 pages, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. I feel like you're getting
48 pages, whatever this is. And I know it's the same with Norse mythology. It's just I love the comic, but it's just such a crappy physical comic.
I hate comics that have that giant white space around all the edges too.
I don't know what that is. That made me go, what? Why?
It looks like somebody made a mistake, or they were reformatting it, and they didn't do it right. And I mean, I've expressed my frustration with Corto Maltese before, but you get that a lot with Corto Maltese, where like
I hated the Marvel Now bottom red banner that they ruined Marvel comic book covers with for like a year and a half.
Yeah,
ooh, I hated that. Marvel Now.
I wish I could remember. There was this comic that I was reading that was really good. That was about like it's an Image comic, I want to say, where the aliens come to Earth and they put some sort of port of. It's called Port of Entry. Did you all read this Port of Entry?
No, I didn't read that one.
That was a really good hard science fiction comic book, and I'm hard to please with hard science fiction. Like I want my hard science fiction hard, you know.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's not enough hard science fiction in comics.
It's because nobody understands science. I mean, look at that movie Gravity. God.
Yeah. Physics in that movie weren't exactly accurate.
Yeah, I mean, the movie's called Gravity. I expect them to hire an expert on gravity and be like, yeah, actually, this would work. Because, yeah, I found that very frustrating. But Port of Entry was a really good... It was sort of structured as a cop, for like Men in Black, I guess, like aliens and cops type thing. But it was bleak, and it was very well written. Very depressing. I'd like that
one. Another comic that's been on my shelf since the 80s that I want to reread, but just because someone mentioned it recently, is did anyone buy The Prowler?
No.
From the 80s?
No.
I think it was an Eclipse comic. Was it John K. Snyder? There was like Revenge of the Prowler and Return of the Prowler.
I was thinking Prowler was a DC title, but no.
No, it's a Spider-Man villain.
There was a Spider-Man villain.
Okay.
Yeah.
Spider-Man villain Prowler.
But no, you're right. There was another comic called Prowler. I do vaguely remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, comic book writers often don't know the difference between a galaxy and a solar system. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, they think
I heard Sleevey complain about that a lot over the years.
Yeah.
I just had a great idea. I just have a book called Better Call Saul, but it's spelled S-O-L.
The Revenge of the Prowler and I think Return of the Prowler. And he had a kid sidekick too. But yeah, that one's been on my shelf since it came out in 1987 or something, and I haven't reread it. It gets mentioned, it gets brought up every now and then on the internet somewhere. And I'm like, I should reread that one. It's only like 8 issues. And Tim Truman may have had something to do with it. Did he write it?
Yeah. Yeah, he sure did. Yep, I remember that. For some reason, like the part of my brain that was good at academic team just remembered that detail. Yeah.
The Prowler.
Tim Truman was really good. Is he still around?
Yeah,
he's still around.
Yeah, he was scout material.
Yeah.
I just found out that the guy who did Poison Elves died. I had no idea.
Oh, Drew Haynes.
Yeah,
he died a long time ago.
Yeah, and Poison Elves wasn't really that good.
Matter of fact, I remember I found out about Poison Elves, I think, because he died. Because I think Dave Sharp used to buy Poison Elves in the
Yes,
90s.
he did. Yep, he was the Poison Elves fan. I remember that too. Yeah. I'm
and
looking
he'd
at
always say, it's not very good, but I love it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it was the only thing like that at the time.
Yeah.
He was part of that wave of Dorkin and Vertigo and all that other stuff. Yeah, Tim Truman used to look like Trevor Von Eden was inking him. And I'm looking at old issues of the Prowler now, and it's really Cat Ironwood was the
editor. Yeah, because I think it was an Eclipse book.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, and I mean,
there's a brand spanking new Tim Truman art book out too. Just on his old career. Cat Ironwood had some really interesting columns. I'll put it to you that way.
I always enjoyed reading.
Yeah.
But I liked any behind the scenes look at comics in the 80s, It was always good stuff. I remember reading Crossfire and loving Mark Evanier's essays in the back about Hollywood.
Right.
Yeah. Evanier, good delightful guy.
Matter of fact, I read his blog these days.
Mark Evanier is just a good writer, period.
Yep.
But I think I liked his column better than I liked the actual comic, which was solid. But
I can see that. It's like Peter David used to do a column in Comic Buyer's Guide.
Yeah.
Subjects. Now, sometimes I like those better than some of the comics he wrote.
Actually, Peter David's it was called "But I Digress," right?
Yeah,
and that's where he used that that's where we sort of worked out the whole lines of attack against Liefeld in the 90s. That's where the whole thing about like anatomy became the be all and end all, is because Peter David just hated Liefeld, but nobody could find a word to express it.
I don't buy into your hypothesis about that because anatomy was big before then. I don't know where you come up with that, but
but the whole like anatomy thing, like it wasn't
as somebody who was an artist in the early 90s and was very young, all you ever heard was anatomy. The problem was then Rob Liefeld came along and all of a sudden you were like, anatomy, but you're hiring this guy.
Yeah, exactly. That's when it broke out into the public, because you were working you were going through purchase and working with people at Marvel. And yeah, those people would be talking about anatomy and composition. Even to this day, nobody talks about composition. Nobody talked about anatomy before we were looking for the words for why we didn't like Rob Liefeld. I mean, I guess professionals did, but it wasn't out in the open at all.
Okay.
And his Peter David's art columns in CBG were a huge part of that, because he just despised Liefeld.
You know what? Back there somewhere on that shelf, I have the
writing either.
What again? Sorry, Scott.
He wasn't a big fan of Todd McFarlane's writing either.
No, he had a lot to say back in the 90s. That David. Yeah, well,
wasn't he the one that suggested that the writers start a comic book company called Substance?
I actually, my favorite column by Peter David about Rob Liefeld was one of the much later ones.
Mm-hmm.
When he said, I finally realized that Rob Liefeld is the Ed Wood of comics. He just doesn't care that the tombstone fell down.
That is actually a really good analogy. I never
he just didn't care that the tombstone. He didn't care that his anatomy wasn't perfect. He wasn't interested in that. He was interested in other things.
The interesting thing about Liefeld to me now is, yeah, that's true. The interesting thing about Liefeld now is that like he's a perfectly nice and normal guy on the internet, but like professionally, all that drama really locked him into his childhood, and he's still in pretty much the same place that he was artistic. Like we were talking about how he's still ridiculously difficult to work with. He's still a prima donna when you try to work with him. He's still stuck in that.
Yeah.
But
and he also, I know a lot of people don't like to work with him because he in the past has tried to get people fired.
Yeah.
People with less power than him always.
Yeah, mutual friends.
So he didn't make a lot of friends with the rank and file of comics because he tried to get people fired in the rank and file all the time.
But he is not a jerk on the internet, which is unusual.
No, I follow him on Twitter because I think he's a good Twitter person.
He's like
I like him
nice
on
guy.
Twitter.
He's really into 80s comics. Like he's like an ordinary
and
nerd.
he also has his finger on what's popular. He's kind of a good pop culture guy, which I'm not.
Yeah.
He seems
I'm very much
guy,
a fringe guy.
And he has a lot of enthusiasm about the field. I just can't stand his art.
Well, and artistically speaking, he's stuck. I mean, if it hadn't been for the Levi's commercial and Hawk and Dove and everything, and him getting really big, and then him getting made fun of by everybody, he probably would have continued to progress as an artist. Yeah. Like I'm determined to make us talk about Keith Giffen. It's going to work one of these days. But like the whole thing with Giffen ripping off, I don't think he ripped off Munoz. Like, do you all know what I'm talking about? The thing in the early
Munoz. He took exact page layouts from him.
Yeah,
Comic Journal used to print them side by side.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. But also, like, I agree with him on his story, which is that sometimes when you study something so much, you just accidentally copy it. You're not sitting there tracing. It's just
he had them side by side.
I know, and if you look at them,
layout. You can't do that by accident. You've drawn enough comics to know that. You don't accidentally draw an Alex Toth layout.
No, I've drawn stuff that was like I did a cover for a comic that was actually, and I had no idea, it was based on a street sign in Thermopolis,
Wyoming. An individual image is easy to subconsciously copy.
Yeah.
A page layout in a comic book is not, because it's 5 or 6 individual images in order. That is tough.
Okay, but
I'm
just saying, like, that whole controversy, like, he came out of the 70s. There were lifters and tracers everywhere. So
I don't hold it against him. I don't care, but don't say he didn't do it.
Okay, but what I'm saying is, like, he comes out as sort of like a sci-fi. No, I don't think so. I'm always talking to this guy who's talking in the chats, but he came across. He started as sort of like a sci-fi Kirby guy, and then it became that was making fun of Keith Giffen is actually sort of one of the transition points where we started talking about comics as an art form. But if you look at his work from around that time, it really screwed him up pretty bad. Like this, like he'd been working as a pro for like 10 years. He was looking for something new. He found this guy Munoz. He really liked it. He tried to incorporate it into his style. Like Son of Ambush Bug is all him trying to incorporate Munoz into his style. People freaked out. And creatively, it didn't do him any favors. It sort of drove him crazy.
When you steal exact layouts, people will notice. And as Sleepy Reader just said here, is copying layout so bad? It can be or it cannot be.
It depends on if you get caught.
When the public thinks you're trying to pull one over on them.
Well, when you have access to all these images on the internet now, yes, you're going to get caught no matter how obscure the layout may be.
Right. Yeah, but we're talking 1983. I mean, he had no idea that anybody was going to catch him.
Yeah.
Right, but Munoz still wasn't exactly an unknown, especially in the comic industry.
Well,
I didn't know him.
No.
But people at Fantagraphics sure did.
Yeah, I mean, no, I certainly did not know. I'm going to find Munoz side by side because I remember it slightly different from you, but I'm also his biggest fan.
I was buying the Comics Journal at the time when they used to run them side by side, and it was obvious. I mean, I didn't care.
Well, no, it was obvious that he was looking at Munoz a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, and even he wasn't arguing about that. But my point is that, like, all this drama, it's sort of like Liefeld. It didn't help him. It didn't make him make any better art.
No.
Yeah, Giffen sort of got stuck in that era. He sort of got stuck in that era of his artistic
when I first saw him was on the Defenders, and he was drawn like Kirby. And I was aware he was drawing like Kirby.
Bill Sienkiewicz started as a Neil Adams clone. Everybody starts as a clone of somebody else.
I always say Bill Sienkiewicz was a better Neil Adams than Neil Adams.
Yeah. And then Kyle Baker was ripping off Sienkiewicz at the beginning.
Well, it's not the idea that someone draws like someone. It's the idea that he took a not very well known in America, but pretty famous somewhere else artist and copied his pages. That was
I get what you're saying, but the thing is that it didn't do anybody any favors. We didn't get better comic books in the world because of it.
No. But the Comics Journal got to be, sell some extra copies by making controversy.
That's true. That's true. We did sell more copies.
I would have loved to have seen a version of Comics Journal that wasn't self-loathing.
Yeah. I liked it back in the early 80s. I thought it was pretty good.
Yeah, I liked the extended interviews they had with artists. Those were great.
But then I stopped liking it at some point.
Right.
Can't tell you when, but sometime in the late 80s, probably.
Yeah. Talking about Giffen, you remember the Trencher series?
Oh, God, I love Trencher. Yeah.
I have all those, but I can't remember a damn thing about any of it now.
Isn't that amazing?
Go back and reread them.
I went back and I deciphered. I mean, that was okay. See, what happened there
I just remember this very jaggedy, jangular art style that he was using. But if you ask me what happens, like I remember liking it, but I don't remember what happened.
It's sort of like Lobo, except he was making up an entire universe at the same. It turned into Punks, if you remember Punks. But okay, so when Image came out, they were all new, and the one and the one old pro that they brought in was Keith Giffen, and they said like, "Hey, Keith, we're going to color these comics with computers," and nobody really knew how computer coloring was going to work at the time. So apparently, Giffen decided to individually outline every single plane in each character in ink. Like every time there was a slight angle, he would draw a circle around it. He outlined literally everything like it was a color by numbers book. Right. And I mean, you want to talk about an experiment that did not work. I always respected Giffen's ability to do things that just straight up did not work. I mean, Trencher is hard to read. You sort of have to go through with a magnifying lens. You have to go back and cover it several times to figure out what the hell just happened. For a Lobo pastiche, maybe it wasn't worth the effort.
But you talked about wanting to go back and reread things. That's like a perfect example for me of something I remember getting and even liking at the time, but I have no recall about the plot whatsoever now.
Yeah, I reread it. It's like, I mean, for better or worse, like Trencher's a superhero. He's dead. He comes back to life, and his job is to find other superheroes who are also dead and drag them back into the land of the dead, basically. And it's just like Lobo in a trench coat. And
fair enough.
Keith Giffen's ear for dialogue is just fucking weird.
I said Sleepy Readers talking about copying covers. I think they do that because it's easy. That's just an easy thing to do.
It depends on the artist.
No, it's easier to copy a composition than come up with your own.
Yes and no. I mean, they solve the problem.
People will like it.
I mean, why do musicians get to cover comics, cover songs, and we don't? I think it's cool.
They pay royalties on that.
A lot.
I don't mind them doing it. I'm just saying it's a lot easier to cover a song than to come up with your own song.
But I am saying if you had to,
that's why it's done.
If people had to pay the Gershwin estate every time they played the chord changes from "I Got Rhythm," or that's the one that you wouldn't have jazz. It just
but
wouldn't.
They probably have to pay if they record it.
Well, things have changed substantially since the 30s, but now since hip hop came into the world. Oh, by the way, I know we're running out of time. The strangest thing occurred to me today. Hip hop was invented by baby boomers. Baby boomers are the most musical generation in world history. There's not even any competition. If you give them rock and roll and hip hop, then what's left? Andrews Sisters? Trip hop?
Trip hop is British, so it doesn't count.
Kraftwerk.
It's a little bit younger, but I mean, I was just thinking about it today. And it's going like Run DMC, like Grandmaster Flash, all those guys. If they were running around in the 80s, there's no way they were born in the 70s.
No,
Those guys.
I think Run DMC was Gen X, but if you were running around in the 70s, the guys who actually created hip hop, you were baby boomer.
Yeah.
If you were running around in the 80s and you were my age, which is the beginning of Generation X.
Yeah, you're right at the very beginning. Run DMC was founded in 81, so unless they were 16, which they might have been.
Yeah, I think they're only a couple of years older than me, which puts them right on Gen X.
Yeah,
they're right on Mr. Flash and the Furious 5 were around in 78, 79.
Those guys would be the tail end of baby boomers as they follow things, as the ridiculous generations are marked.
And DJ Kool Herc was playing his sound systems 71, 72.
Yeah.
Yeah, the RZA was born in 1969. Wow. That's Gen X, but I mean we're right on the edge there. I switched over because DJ Run was born in 64, but right. Yeah, like all these people.
I think it was the first year of Gen X, 64. They say.
Okay, Sleepy Reader has another good point. Yeah, those because a lot of I consider Roger Waters to be like the beginning of the baby boomers, which I understand is a controversial opinion for a lot of people. But I figure if you were
that note, we're going to sign off. We've had some controversy. Roger Waters was the beginning of baby boomers. Well, all right.
Next time that you all have. Thanks for inviting me, y'all. I had a good time. It was, nice
glad to have you on.
Yeah.
All right. Anybody have a sign off? Yeah. Should we steal cartoonist kayfabes again and buy more comics?
Buy my comic at least.
Buy.
Yeah, I already have actually.
Everybody read each other's comics.
I'm sorry I've been very distracted and I haven't been running the Kickstarter. I'm having my own family issues at the moment, but you will get your comic.
Kickstarter War on Christmas comic, Jeff Sebesta.
Yeah, the one and only.
You guys all have a good week out there.